Alright, well, that starts that. I hope this is all working. Alright, set that all up. Nobody's here right now. Let me double check. Yep, nobody's here. Okay, so then this is basically just gonna be a recording like a video. I don't know why I'm taking a minute here to start the head. I don't do well in front of crowds, which is funny considering there's no crowd. So yeah, it's hard to explain this video since I decided to make it a bit impromptu after the funny that UMG pulled and me feeling like I owe something. Well, I really should have just made this a fucking video instead. Yeah, I don't know why I'm clamming up. This video or stream, whatever, is supposed to be more towards the end of my head. More towards the idea of taking like anybody here right from the start and trying to get you guys to understand like all the way to min-max, or just at least for the more experienced players watching maybe understand a more complicated why the hell am I all stuttery today? Not understand the more complicated things, to maybe pick up a tip or two or something along the way. Outside of that, I should probably get started. So basically the first thing, don't mind the alt tabs, sorry, would be general doctrine. This is something that I might as well go over for somebody who is brand new to shipbuilding, whatever. If we start off with a strategic ship, so like a new player, you won't understand really what you're expected to do, so that's why I'm trying to cover this. So in terms of general doctrine, you're going to have two kinds of ship. You're going to have the strategic ship and you're going to have the tactical ship. Tactical ship goes into combat, fights other things, shoots guns at them, whatever. While a strategic ship tries its best to stay on the strategic map and never fight something face to face. In the name of efficiency's sake, you never want your strategic ships to see tactical combat as much as you can. They'll be your tankers, your missile carriers, your aircraft carriers, all that. And your tactical ships will, for the most part, unless they have a secondary air defense role, will not see strategic-related combats in any form. So the biggest reason you want both kinds, now you can easily get away with one or the other, or a combination you can sort of get away with. Usually it's not very effective to use a combination ship because, you know, it's jack of all trades, master of none doesn't really work as well in this game. That's why a Sevastopol only run was so hard. But it's still doable, right? And there are people who have done carrier only runs. There's people who have done, you know, Bimblbrick style only runs as well. So it's possible to get away with one or the other. But realistically speaking, the easiest time you're going to have is if you have two crutches to stand on rather than one. If one of your kneecaps gets blown out, you're not going to fall over because you have a crutch on either arm. You could say it that way. So you need both strategic and tactical. Why? Because strategic assets are actually the more effective than tactical ones at thinning out enemies and dealing with heavier threats, so strike groups, very large garrisons. Those can happen when like a missile group, a carrier group, and two trade groups land in the same city. A single lightning just can't fight all those. It doesn't have the durability or the amount of fuel to really do it. Yes, you can do retreat and re-engage, but realistically speaking, you do not need this guide if you know how to do all that. Well, I might have something here you might not know, but that's going to be later. So the point mostly of strategic ships is they can take on more tough threats. They can make the game easier, basically, right? The problem with strategic ships is every single way you attack expends money in one way, shape, or form. But unless you strafe somebody with carriers. And strafing somebody with carriers is literally throwing away money in terms of planes, especially after 1.16 changed things. Brain stuttering again. You don't see me stutter as much in the videos because I like to cut those things out. So why am I breaking up? Why is my mind somewhere? I don't know. A lot of stress recently. So the point of a tactical ship then is that realistically it's a simple thing. As long as you don't lose an armor part or you don't lose a part of a ship, repairing it is free. And as long as you only use HE, it's also free to shoot enemies down. You can use, of course, ammunition as well, which will cost money, but HE is free. So the idea behind a tactical ship is that they can do things very cheaply, especially garrison cleaning. You don't need to use missiles that cost 2,000 gold to kill a courageous when you can just fly in there with literally even just a courageous. You can fly in there with like this thing and use only the coaxial guns and kill an entire group. Like, the point really is behind tactical combat is it's cheap. That's the point of it. So strategic is more for your heavy lifting, while tactical is more for your economy, you can say. So with that said, where's my notes? So what you're looking for in a strategic design is kind of balanced out. So the first thing I should probably note is, like, for example, is missile carriers. Does this save slot have Typhoon, or is it slot 3? No, it doesn't. But did I really just press exit? Go me. Nice one, idiot. I went. Wow. Okay. So the problem with having too many missiles on a ship is that, how can I say it? There's not really much penalty for carrying less than, say, 4 missiles. You only really need 4 to 6 missiles to take on basically any threat in the game. Because the thing is, if you land and just repair, you can just put the missiles in the tubes, and missiles that are in your ship's inventory or your group's inventory don't actually weigh anything. Where the hell is local files? Yeah, that. Open that. Yeah, I know. It's fucking... Yeah, okay. Alright, I have no clue if my sound cut out while I was doing that. Okay, is it back? Double check. Yes, it's back. Cool. Watch it crash on load. It is crashing on load. So the problem really is with carrying a lot of missiles around, it's a single missile weighs 250 something tons. You're looking at literally, for a Typhoon, you're literally looking at 2,500 tons of missiles being carried around. Large missile carriers are not a good idea. The same applies to aircraft. Aircraft don't actually weigh much on their own, but the ammo racks to actually arm them do. Why is this a massive bonus? I don't remember setting the bonus to a fucking giga amount, but hey, it works. Right. Alright, so I think that save slot had a full ship unlock set on it, so I should be able to just open up any AI ship now. So my mouse is working out. Typhoon. Where's Typhoon? Typhoon? Do I not have Typhoon? Is this not? No, I think that was one of my 115 slots I was talking about. I'll try the slot 2. It might be that one. Nope, it's not. Anyway. Well, whatever. Who cares? So, yeah. You really don't want to go over a certain amount. And this is a common theme. You don't really want to go over a certain critical mass. It's a common new player mistake. I made that mistake my very first run. I made a fucking stupid carrier with a bajillion planes strapped to it. It's just a longbow with a tower strapped to it. But in reality, you don't really need a lot of planes. The longbow alone is about the limit of what you consider usable, right? Oh, here we go. The Typhoon. Typhoon's a good example of when you have too many missiles, because right, this is 260 tons per. Like, you'll see the efficiency just spike if I take like all but 3 of them off. Gains 20 kilometers an hour. I forget what the fuel consumption was. To wait for the Typhoon's inefficient as all hell. Anyways, I keep dawdling on the point because I don't know why I get nervous. How can I say this? Basically, yes, there's a certain critical mass you want to aim for. You don't want to put too much on a ship in terms of strategic capability. You don't want to put too little on a ship in terms of strategic capability, right? Novorossiysk is a good example of too much in terms of planes, right? Because there comes a problem. The very similar problem happens with aircraft, in that after what 5, 6, 7, 7's probably enough T7, so you could probably get up to 10 or so. After a certain number of planes, the problem with having more planes is more just having them in stock and repairing them. But you don't really need to throw this many planes at something at once, right? Once you have like 10 planes, you're going to handle any real missile threat in terms of intercept. And the way the new 116 bombing works, it's not the greatest idea to really do mass attacks anymore. So you don't actually need a massive amount of planes because the timer is shorter than or close to, I think, the rearm time on the planes. So you don't actually need a lot of planes. Which is probably one of the biggest complaints about this game, is the fact that it's basically the inventory system kneecapping you. Anyways, that said, strategic designs don't want to go in combat, as I mentioned. They do not at all. So you actually generally don't want to put armor on them, right? And you'll actually want to take the armor off any you find, which is pretty easy to do. I'll go into it later. I call it reductive shipbuilding. But the idea is you really want to just maximize your fuel efficiency on the map and get a decent strategic speed so that they're usable to move around. And then everything else is just focusing on, you can think of the ship as its primary capabilities, which is, its sensors, its aircraft or missile or both complement. And that's about it, I think, for strategic capabilities. Tankering, right? Excess fuel weight to accommodate lighter ships. This is why the Skylark is such a commonly recommended and such a good ship, is that it's actually very close to all of the above, really. The Skylark, can I find it? Fucking brain. Where is it? Skylark. The Skylark has a 2x Elant dome, which, for the record, is probably one of the most overpowered things that the player has available to them, is the fact of 2x Elant, because of the way Elant mechanics work. I'll get into it later. 2x Elant's very good. IRST's something that exists. It's pretty cheap. It's got tanking capabilities. There you go. It's not gone over any critical mass. It's not carrying an obscene amount of fuel that's not usable. It's not, well, in this case, it's not like, I'd use the ERs as an example of not going over an obscene amount of missiles. The ERs are, the Triumphant's hard to say. I really want to like the Triumphant, but it has a lot of excess hull. Yars, where are you? So many. There we are. Is there Yars Mark 2? Yeah, Yars 2. Yars Mark 2 is better than Yars outright, if you ask me. You can always paste more engines on it, right? Yars is not excessive in any fashion. 4 missiles is perfectly about enough to handle most situations. But yeah. Now, brain. What was I going to? Tactical, right. Tactical has a similar issue where you don't want to go over a certain amount of guns, because guns imply tonnage and volume, which in turn, the Gladiator is a good example of hitting the high end of what's actually effective. Now, of course, with gun arcs disabled right now, cruisers can kind of go pretty far beyond this in terms of effectiveness, but once gun arcs get turned back on, it's probably going to stay. It's going to go back to what we call the 3-5 gun meta. Most people call it 3-4, but I like to think 5 is still kind of meta. Which is the idea that going past 4 AK-100 or Molot is becoming inefficient in terms of volume, and I don't think I have a good example on hand of 3-4 gun going to extreme. Where the hell's that? I'm trying to think of. Okay, let me just Gladiator. Where's Gladiator? Gladiator. Gladiator's a good example. Like, once you start trying to fit the 5th gun on, you gotta get a piece of ammo, then you gotta get power, then you got this and that. The volume starts to inflate, and you start taking hits, and then you also have to start beefing up the engines to actually keep it agile. The Gladiator's actually not that agile by a lot of people's standards. And so you get what we call the 3-5 gun meta, something like that, which is where you want to stay near this amount of guns. The Gladiator is ironically very close to this. Of course, you can do some stupid shit to the Lightning and get it up. Do I have one of my Lightnings with a 4-gun setup? And get it. Well, I don't need it. Basically, Lightning with 4 guns. I can do that, but it has the capability. Anyway, so that goes over what you want in a ship, just for newer players who haven't played the campaign enough to know. Now, of course, tactical designs also need a proper protection scheme, unlike strategic designs, which usually want to avoid void armor because their idea is they just dodge things on the map or they stay out of danger. Strategically, tactical ships want to get in a fight, obviously, so they need armor, especially because if you don't lose the piece of armor and you repair it, it costs you nothing, just time. So... Man, you guys don't see how much editing I do to fucking deal with myself fucking breaking up. How can I say this? Thanks. Thanks, Shade. Brain, where am I falling apart? Where was I? I was on protection. Right, protection schemes. You generally want as much of an encompassing scheme, though of course tactical designs can fall into subsets where you protect against a specific arc. Some people call it backwards. So they call it bottoms. Bottom top fighter is a good example of this, and some people say it backwards of each other. Some people say bottom fighters and you're putting the enemy below you, and some people say bottom fighters and you're going below the enemy. But the idea is the same, so it doesn't really matter which nomenclature you use. I don't care. Point is, in this case, for my nomenclature, I'd say bottom fighter means you're below. In this case, the Gladiator's armor is all on top. The APS is basically just an interim for if something gets below you for a moment. It's not going to stop anything, especially coaxial rounds of any kind. So you're going to want to get below them and use the main armor arc against them, which means that, generally speaking, the Gladiator, it's pretty useful to do such a thing because you then save out on having to armor the bottom half of the Gladiator. Gladiator would literally go 120 kilometers an hour, I think, in a fully armored scheme. Because, interesting fact, a lot of people haven't noticed, the Gladiator literally has the Lightning's engine scheme. It literally has the Lightning's engine scheme just repositioned. It's very underthrusted for how heavy it is. Well, because it's loaded with twice the guns and more necessities, APS, the missiles. It's got everything going for it. It's got the power to hold everything. Then it's got the armor arc. So that's why it's But in a scheme, there are ways to get around and get more out of a tactical ship by specifically. There are side fighters who protect on the side specifically. And that's especially going to be more important once arcs are re-enabled because, these guns, right now they shoot everywhere. Ignore these red lines, right? Because 116, we've turned them off. But once this becomes enabled, you can do line schemes and whatnot, and that can make it so you can fire all guns to a side, but almost none of them straight up and down, in which case armor scheme, So you'll probably see more of that in the 116.4 or 117 or whatever comes next meta. But in the current meta, guns anywhere just work. So we're kind of actually returned back to 115 meta, where gimbal squeezing is useful, but that comes in later. All right, so I think at that point, specific part balancing becomes important. So this is more of a go over of specific parts. I'm just gonna grab this fucking bridge. There we go. All right, so first up, we're just going to talk about hull because this is kind of important. Which is really simple fact. 2x1 hull actually weighs less per unit than 2x2 hull does. 25.8 over 11.2, which is 22.4 tons versus 25 tons. The reason this is important is it means whenever possible, if you're mounting 2x1 modules, never mount them in a 2x2 hull. Try and mount them into 2x1 hull. This is just a rule of thumb. And this also actually changes the parts. This actually changes the balance between 2x2 and 2x1 parts, because 2x2 parts are inherently fighting an uphill battle in their balancing because their native hull is actually heavier. That you'll have to keep this in mind in the future. One other thing to note is reinforced hull has been nerfed so many goddamn times, it's not even funny, and it is almost as heavy as armor. Like, it's not even funny. And realistically speaking, nobody in meta shipbuilding really uses this reinforced hull for much anymore. 128 versus 45. Is it really that light? I mean, the HP difference, though. Yeah, to get the same amount of HP, you'd need 2. So you would end up in a situation of something like that, which is pretty close. And then you don't even have the hardness bonus, and you don't even block shells natively without putting something inside. Oh yeah, putting something inside also pushes the tonnage up. However, KK in all of his infinite glory of trying to nerf reinforced hulls completely ignored the flight deck this entire time, which has like the same tonnage almost exactly as light hull while having almost the entire hull of reinforced. Oh, and by the way, remember how he tried to nerf hull by making it so you can't shoot through it? Yeah, flight deck apparently doesn't count as empty hull. Anyways, so yeah, flight deck is unironically used in a lot of meta shipbuilding as a protection piece in the place that reinforced hull. When you're using it, you have to keep in a few things in mind. It doesn't like to attach to the bottom of things. You have to actually kind of stretch something around the side to attach it if you want to attach to the bottom, and it can't be rotated. That's the only real limitations flight deck puts on you. On top of that, flight deck will cost, it will be a bit more difficult to repair, especially in terms of time, if I remember correctly, than armor. And it doesn't have that hardness difference. So flight deck is more susceptible to low caliber rounds than armor actually is. You can see the literal difference here. It's literally like 2 pieces of flight deck literally gets you the same HP as. It's kind of strange that you can put it on top. It's like, you kind of just got to build backwards. It's kind of dumb, right? You can't just place on the bottom, but you can just, instead of doing that, you can just place on top. It's kind of dumb. To get like build from the bottom up, it's like, but like 11.8 tons versus 128, and 2 of these has the same HP modifier. It's like, I don't even understand sometimes, man. The only difference is there is a hardness modifier on armor, which I think armor was next, so I may as well. Yes. So the reason why armor is used is the biggest thing is it has a damage reduction modifier. It's hard to explain it easily, but the idea is the smaller the caliber of the shell that hits the armor, the less damage it does. Like if you hit armor with 37 mil, the damage is almost non-existent, right? Like you could think of it as like a 98% reduction or 99% in the damage. But if like a 180 mil hits the armor, it's only like a 5% reduction in the damage, or a 220. So like a large, I don't know how 220 works. 220 is really weird. I don't know why. It's just different. But anyways, large caliber rounds are better at defeating armor inherently. They have less damage reduction against armor, but armor is specifically very good against small caliber rounds. That's the main part. That's why the APS combo in 115 of putting an APS behind an armor was so stupidly powerful. It wasn't even funny. If you don't know, the active protection system is just an active module. It recharges, it fires a thing, and if a large caliber, any shell that isn't a 57 or 37 mil comes towards it, it'll detonate. It can't stop a zenith or a missile, but it can stop a bomb or a rocket. And it can stop 100, 130, 180, and 220 mil. Coincidentally, you'll realize that the only rounds it's not stopping, besides the zenith, are low caliber rounds that the armor is specifically very powerful against. Which means you kind of have this, like, the APS takes out the big rounds and the armor stops all the small rounds, and they kind of just mutually protect each other. It was just a kind of dumb combo. And he changed it that you can't shoot APS through armor by giving it a wider arc now. You also can't mount APS next to each other effectively now because it kind of blocks itself. It's weird. Actually you can. Forget. I think that's when you turn it that it gets weird. I don't remember. Point is, that exists. APS isn't really something I'd recommend using much anymore, simply because I think I got a chance reduction. I forget if he's fixed the factor doesn't reload. I think he did. And it's just, you can't put it behind armor. It's like such a big thing. And he increased the price of it, I think, at the same time. It's like 2,000 gold. For reference of what 2,000 gold is, that's like a gun. That's literally like a Vimple, I think. Is it also an AK-100? Yeah, it's literally an AK-100. Right? Like, that's pretty expensive for a 1x1 module with 100 durability. Anyways, so in terms of protection schemes, it'll kind of depend. Flight deck will increase the volume of the ship and make it tougher to repair in both, expense. Armor will be compact, which means you'll have a bit less of a hitbox, right? Instead of something skimming you, it'll actually go past you. It's also going to fare better against smaller caliber rounds. However, you are getting less bang for your buck. Also, I think because I don't know how the XP modifiers exactly work, but I think flight deck might reduce your XP slightly. Because I think armor would reduce your XP more than flight deck would, because it's tonnage, I think, based. You'd have to check a little bit around. It won't be a big difference if you ask me, though. You're looking at like a 10% difference between overall, if a complete armor scheme. Usually they're used in complement to each other. Like you'll see some kind of scheme where like the top here might be like flight deck, and then the armor protects the corners, something like that. There's a few different ways to do it. It's basically used as a light armor. You can say it that way, because that's really what it is. Anyways, I'm gonna keep moving because I'm probably dawdling on the same subject. Gun balancing. Oh, this is one of my favorites because KK like to fuck it over for some reason. Okay, all right. So gun balance. Now, where do I start with gun balance? Where do I start with gun balance? Okay, let me just separate them into three major types then. Alright, we're going to put A220 in the middle of nowhere because A220 is just weird. We're going to go with our auxiliary calibers. We're going to go with the meta calibers. We're going to go with 180 mil. You call these medium caliber if you want. And then there's the A220. So, how can I explain this? You basically have 4 major calibers, and the A220 is just weird. So I'm just going to talk about it completely separately at the end. Let's forget it exists for now. It functions a lot like a 180 mil in a lot of aspects, so if you really want to think about it. So you have your small calibers. These are the Vimple and the 2A37. These are mostly for close-in defense work, shoot-down missiles, used to be shoot-down projectiles somewhat, but not really anymore. Close-in defense. Also, they're used as guns on small ships pretty often, but realistically speaking, an AK-100 will do better at anti-ship work. They're not really supposed to be anti-ship, but the basic idea is the 2A37 is supposed to be the be-all, end-all of defense, while the Vimple is it's cheaper, right? 3,000 versus 2,000 gold. It's cheaper. It has a much better continuous fire rate, which means you're not punished so much for using up ammo constantly, like firing it repeatedly often, because you can get the ammo back very quickly. And it does much better being a 57 mil instead of 37 mil. It does better. It actually does just below adequately against armor, as opposed to 2A37 just basically not existing. And yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna go into actual detail in them a bit. I'm just trying to get the overview of them. Basically, defense weapons. The meta guns are the 100 and the mullet. I'm probably getting like 3 people screaming at me, "Oh, the Squall's great," and whatever it is. Trust me, I love the Squall. Okay, I love using 180 mil and everything, but I'm gonna admit they're not really on meta. Anyways, I'll explain a bit further. Just hold on for a second. So the AK-100 and the mullet, what's so powerful about them is they only cost 1 ammo point. Why did you do me this trade? It is good. It's just, it has an issue. It doesn't have as much of the issue as the Sarmat and the Mark 1 have. But anyways, so the AK-100 and the mullet, they are considered the meta guns. The big thing you can think of why I might as well talk about the 180s while I'm talking about this. The big problem the 180s have while fighting the meta guns is just what we call ammunition to DPS efficiency, or I forget the word for it. I think they just call it ammo efficiency. It only costs 1 ammo for these, while these all have some kind of scaling on the ammo costs. The problem really is that despite this, the actual overall DPS of the 180 mils is actually very similar per mount. Or it's a little bit above, I think, but it's not anywhere in proportion to the amount of ammo they consume, which means that they don't actually over any kind of serious fight actually deliver their performance in ammo, right? Like 1 Mark 1 180 is not as good as 2 Mullets or 2 AK-100s usually. 1 Sarmat is you're literally comparing that to a Gladiator. Are you really telling me a Paladin's going to out DPS a Gladiator? No, it's not. The Squall kind of gets away with it. It's actually, I think, better than the other 2 if I remember correctly. I haven't actually done... It's the one I haven't done so much of the math on. It kind of can. The problem more with the Squall is just its rarity and stuff. If you can fit a Squall to something, for the hell of it, just do it, because it's fun. And obviously, it's But I think actually 8 of these does still fight on very comparable ground. Anyways, so the AK, I should probably explain the accuracy mechanic a bit, because that's actually a bit more important. The way accuracy of guns is determined in Highfleet is proportional to two things: the amount of guns on the mount and the caliber. So the less guns per mounting, the more accurate, and the larger caliber, the more accurate. So as it stands, the 2A37 is the least accurate gun because it's 6 barrels on a smallest caliber mount in the game, and the Mark 1 180 is the highest accuracy gun in the game because it's a single barrel on a large caliber mount. On the largest caliber mount that isn't the A220, which is a 6 barrel mount, so it actually comes out below. So what this actually means is that if you ranked them by accuracy, it looks a bit more like this. Yes. I think actually the Squall is more accurate than the AK-100. It'll look something like this. It might not be exactly this, but that's the rough ranking of accuracy of the guns. So the reason why the mullet is so meta is because mostly actually due to the faults of the Mark 1 180. The Mark 1 180 is unique in that it's actually the gun with no clip. It literally only can load 1 shell at a time. It doesn't have any clip. It doesn't store 2 rounds, doesn't store 3 rounds. The problem with this might not seem like a big issue. It's like, oh, shoot it immediately. The problem really is you're not always in a good position to shoot immediately. You might be mid-dodge, so the round might have a lot of sweep, which might make it fucking really difficult to hit. 4 seconds or 3 seconds, I forget how long it is, between shots means you don't really have a lot of follow-up lead, unless you're using a Vimple to keep your aim. By the way, fun fact, 180s and Vimples have very close shell speeds, so you can use a Vimple as a shot guide for them. A little bit of a life hack when you're using Seva. Anyways, the Mark 1 180, how could I say it? Yeah, it's just not ergonomic. That's the problem, really. It's just difficult to use, and it's not difficult in, oh, if you have a lot of skill, it works. I mean, it is like that, but it's even if you have a lot of skill, it just doesn't feel good to use. It feels really nice when you hit somebody with something. I mean, I won't deny the old Fearsome was pretty fun to fly for sometimes, but if you're really trying to fight actual threats consistently with it, it's just not as fun. So the problem really is you have to fire that round immediately or you lose your DPS. So if you have a 4-second reload, right, and then after that you've stopped reloading because the round's reloaded, you have to shoot the round as soon as possible or you lose DPS. For every second you aren't firing, you're essentially adding a second to your next reload, right? Because it only starts reloading when you fire that round. The good news is the Sarmat sucks even harder in that its DPS is so much lower. You can actually, I think, you can wait a whole second with 2 Mark 180s as opposed to 1 Sarmat. You can wait a whole second before firing the 180s, and they still have, I think, 20% more DPS than the Sarmat. The Sarmat's continuous DPS is absolutely horrendous. It's not even funny. And the moment you put the Sarmat up against an APS system, right, because it has a 20-second recharge, it's going to make your life absolute misery. Because a single Sarmat mount's only going to get a shell back every, 5 seconds? So and this gets a charge back every 20. So your risk, and the first 2 are going to also disappear, right? There's the initial charge. Is it 2 or 3 now? I'm going to say it's 2, not 3, because if it's 3, it's even worse. If it's 2, then your first 2 rounds, your first 10 seconds of DPS just disappears if you hit the APS, which can be a pain in the ass if you're fighting a Nomad, by the way, which has 4 per side. And then you lose a quarter of your DPS for good. That's the biggest complaint everybody's usually had with the Sarmat while trying to make it work. Is the Sarmat kind of just doesn't deal with APS very well. It's just, ugh. So you got those problems, and that's why Squall's kind of okay. Squall doesn't have the problem so much that the Mark 1 has. So then the problem becomes, if you want to really fight the AI attack, you want to keep at a range, and you want to be lobbing, you want to be way over, imagine the screen's where a fight's happening, the entire screen, right? You want to be staying on the right side and lobbing from a distance to them. You'll be able to dodge more effectively. You'll be able to, it's a good way to fight up against strike groups. Is to try and just pull range and dodge everything they have while delivering accurate fire. Lower accuracy weapons just can't do that because the dispersion pattern, like if an AK-100 halfway across the screen, is literally larger than the vertical height of a board. It's not even funny. So you're realistically going to basically beat through the entire armor of the ship uniformly at that range, not even hitting everything. And that's the main reason why Mullet is so preferred, is because it's the second most accurate gun in the game, while it still has pretty damn good DPS. It's 130 mil, which means it still retains a lot of damage against armor, and it has a 4-clip, which means you can actually, like, you have like an 8-second window to really make a volley happen. Unlike, like, it's a complete opposite of the Mark 180, where it actually has pretty good ergonomics. And because it's a 4-round burst, it can actually overcome APS, unlike the Sarmat, and the DPS isn't shit because it's in the category of one ammo cost, which means it's actually efficient for its ammo cost in terms of continuous DPS. Anyways, with that said, the AK-100 does have actual advantages over the Mullet, which is why they're very contested in what's the meta gun? What do you use, right? Because they're both meta guns. In my opinion, they both have their own uses. So the AK-100 is a lower caliber gun, so its AP rounds are kind of just useless. Also, everything 100mm and below doesn't have access to laser guided. That's a big point in the Mullet's favor if you really want to kill something. Even in 116, laser guided is still really good because it allows you to laze something. The AK-100's big advantage is that its reload rate is much higher, which means it has a much higher continuous DPS. The continuous DPS of the AK-100 is very good. It is, I think it might have the highest DPS per ammo and everything else considered in the game, but I'm not sure. It is basically, the rip something apart gun. It doesn't have the same armor performance, doesn't have laser guided, so it's not really and it doesn't have that accuracy. So it's really not suited for fighting heavy targets like strike groups, Variag fight, stuff like that. It's not so good at actually that. But if you want to tear apart a garrison where a lot of the targets are unarmored or they're kind of swarming you and you're going to be in close combat all the time, so the accuracy doesn't matter, or you just want to, kill them quickly, the AK-100 is very good at that. Also, the AK-100 actually has a versatility in its point. If you load proximity rounds into the AK-100, it just does much better than any other gun does. Because the dispersion suddenly becomes a pro. It's still a 100 mil, so it still has proxy. It's the smallest gun with proxy in the game. The dispersion's a pro, really, in that case. You actually can... The way the proxy mechanics work, I don't even know exactly in 116, but... generally hitting head on gives you more damage, so you want to be very accurate actually with proxy, funnily enough. But once you load proxy, the damage, the ability for them to do air defense is quite good. It's generally considered the best hard point for air defense with proxy loaded. There is the caveat that that's going to cost money to do. Also, back in the day, before he nerfed properly, thank God, proxy didn't used to have a damage demodifier in 115 and earlier against armor, which meant that proxy was just doing a shit ton of damage to armor. So proxy just turned this thing into a fucking chain gun. It wasn't even funny. Like, it just would completely rip something apart. It wasn't even funny. Like, that was one of the big things that made Mullet more powerful recently, is even though they nerfed laser guy, they nerfed proxy, which hurt the AK-100 more than the laser, against strike groups more than the laser guy. Anyways, I'm digressing. AK-100. I lost my train of thought a little bit. Right. DPS. Yes. So it's better mostly at garrison work, and because it can just load proxy and suddenly become an air defense gun, it's good at like just detached corvettes doing their own thing, just general running around things. It's very good. It's a very good multi-role weapon, while the Mullet is just more of a I will kill ships, specific weapon. And that's really the choice. So usually what I'd say is when you're building attack ships, some people adhere to the concept of you actually have ships dedicated to raiding and commerce raiding and whatnot. That would be like something you put an AK-100 on, and there's a dedicated strike group killer, which is, a frigate of some kind that's built to be just agile enough, but very well armored and armed. And it's basically only exists to be carried into a fight against a strike group and just go fucking blast one. That's what a Mullet would be very good at. But both can very much do the other's role. Don't get me wrong. That said, CIWS still is the best gun out of all of them if you don't have, if you don't want to spend, you can say, sorry, it's the best free option, you could say, right? And economics is an important thing because just intercepting a missile might cost almost the entire missile's cost with an AK-100. The problem with CIWS has is that it's actually initially probably one of the worst guns at intercepting missiles in early game, because you need the ever ready perk, because CIWS has a 20-second reload time to get the entire drum, and then the entire drum doesn't even last that long as it stands. I mean, you only need like a half or 3/4. The problem is the missile will literally hit you, and you'll only have like 10 rounds to defend yourself with. It doesn't really work as well as you'd think. But once you get ever ready, the CIWS suddenly just bumps in power scale and suddenly becomes the best gun without ammo. Before that, you might want to use... It's kind of a debate between AK-100 actually still has a relatively large hitbox, because Vimpel's been nerfed. Vimpel only really worked if you put it in mass. When you put it in mass, it was surprisingly powerful because it just added up. It has a very high continuous rate of fire. But I don't know. I think I'm digressing a bit. And anyways, the Squall... I think I've gone over all the guns. Have I gone over all the guns well enough? I'm not sure. Oh yeah, one note about the Squall. There's also a bit of a upwards curve. I don't remember the exact curve of which ones are slower mounts to turn, but the Squall has a serious problem with turn time, which people... Alright, I'll get moving on. But the Squall has a serious problem with... how could I say it? It has a problem with turn time. It's pretty bad. You get it on target, it'll blast something, but yeah. You could say it's ergonomic problem out of all the fucking problems you get at all these guns. Also, sorry, that's surprisingly accurate. On top of that, notes is crew and power constraints, right? Because that's something that has to be noted that I'm trying to do here as well. 6 over 2.4, so 2 Sarmats is actually going to eat 0.8 less power than a Squall. It's also going to eat two less people. 2 Mark 1 180s, as opposed to a Sarmat, will eat the exact same power and crew. Don't forget, of course, that these need to be mounted. The tonnage might be different because you have to be mounting these on large hull, right, in this case. And in this case, you'll be mounting it to 2 small hull, which is still lighter than large hull. And in this case, you'll be mounting one of these compared to 2 of these. Then you are really looking at a hull difference. And that's one of the big reasons you might want to upgun, but it's still not really worth it. Oh, right. Arc re-enabling. When our arc re-enabling becomes a thing, larger guns will have a bit of a buff, and that they won't be blocked by more of the same gun. For now, though, it's still like this, but that actually is mostly a point in the power of the Squall, if you ask me. Anyways, but even then, these guns kind of still are in pain. And remember, the 3-5 gun meta, it's pretty easy to still make the gun arcs work by just adding 1 gun or so, and you'll kind of get most of your firepower back, as opposed to try and make these work. It just isn't. Yeah, like I mentioned before, with TAC, it's a 3-5 gun meta or whatever. In that case, just easier to work out. Anyways, a little bit of a note from 115 moving to 116. The hit boxes on the Vimpel and the 2A37 were also fucked with. They don't really shoot down other shells anymore like they used to. And they also, for some reason, they struggle more against missiles. I don't know why the point defense weapons had to be nerfed against missiles while they buffed the missiles. That was like the dumbest balance decision ever. But yeah, they're going to kind of struggle nowadays. I'd mostly go... Like, it used to be I actually was more preferential to the Vimpel. But nowadays, I'd say just take the 2A37. Because the Vimpel just kind of just doesn't do its self-defense job adequately. And you have the AK-100 if you want to do the offensive job. It doesn't really do its niche anymore. It's sad because the Vimpel is my favorite gun. But it's just how it is. But yeah, usually when you're building, if you want to build an on-meta ship, it's these 3 guns or bust most of the time. If you want to stay on-meta. Because technically cruisers are off-meta as it is. Of course, if you wanted to build a cruiser, go ahead. In which case I'd recommend... Large numbers of Mark 1 180s can work. I'd mostly just recommend trying to stay with Sarmat. You'll find that no matter what you try, the Sarmat really just doesn't kind of work for some reason. An interesting little thing about building with the Mark 1 180s, you'll find that you'll suddenly have hard points available. Yeah, it's a double buff. Makes perfect sense indeed. But yeah. Anyways, that's that. A220, real quick. Almost forgot this. Yeah, just don't. The ergonomics are kind of bad. The only thing that MRL has going for it, literally, is the fact that KK forgot to remove gimbal squeezing. That's it. That's all I can think of. Like, it's a fun gun to use for, like, or rocket launcher to use for, like, 5 minutes. And it's just annoying. And it's like the damage isn't... I don't know. You can make it work. The big thing about it is it's literally Sarmat tier ammo cost, which is just kind of pain. If you can make it work, it's pretty based. All right, it can work. It feels more like a 180 mil, right? It has the large explosion, but if I remember correctly, I don't know if it's been changed. I haven't tested with it much to say, but the way it's damage demultiplies against armor used to be that it was treated more like a small caliber round for some reason, because it's like a raw blast. I don't know. I think the biggest detractor right now at the 1820 is it doesn't have special ammunition. It's not versatile at all, right? At least you could load proxy or laser guided on these and get more firepower suddenly out of them, or make them a slightly powerful in air defense. The A220 is quite literally only there to shoot other ships, and it's not even going to be able to hit small ships very effectively. It's only going to hit large ones. That's the biggest problem with the A220 is it's so min-maxed into its thing that it's just not versatile. That's like that's the reason why the AK-100 and the Molot are so powerful, is their versatility, right? And it's one of this is just the extreme end of them not being versatile. If you want to make it work, go ahead, and I'll show you later. It has a bit of a niche, funny, but for now, just that's my advice. Where's the other notation? Where are we going next? I've been here too long. All right, missiles. All right, this doesn't take as long to go over, but I might as well. This is more of a strategic thing, but I might as well go over the missiles. It doesn't matter if I take a nuke or not. A100s. Where's the 15p? 15p? Cool. I'll do bomb ordnance as well while I'm here, actually. And Zeniths. I'll mention them. Do I have a P? Yeah, I have a P on screen, right? Yeah. Okay, so strategic missiles. Let's go over just the strat missiles because they're much easier to go over quickly. So there's 4 main types of missiles. Technically 2 are just the same with a different seeker warhead, which are the 15 and the 15p. You can also call them the X15. It's X in Russian, it's KH in English. I don't even know. There's the R3 and there's the A100. The R3 is the ballistic. You have 2,000 kilometer range. It'll take roughly 10 minutes to hit target. It's only going to be able to hit targets on... it's only going to hit targets that are stationary. I think it can actually hit them if you do air stop while airborne. I don't remember though. Yeah. It doesn't really have much use in campaign. It's more just an enemy weapon, but it's very useful in speed running and challenge scenarios type situations. Very useful in the post-key buffing, just to shoot back, just to have the extra reach as opposed to an X-15's 1,500 kilometer range. Anyways, there's not much to know about it. The biggest notation is that when it engages, it comes from a high angle, as opposed to coming from close to horizon in. It'll come from a high angle near the top of the screen. It'll actually come down, which means that it's actually kind of a bit less effective, but more effective depending on what you're fighting. It means it'll damage things on top of the ship more, with the long-range nuclear burn if you use a nuclear warhead. But it also means that it's more susceptible to missiles, at least in 115 or earlier, when the coding was much more, does the sprint hit it head on? Anyways, so KH-15s, they have a relatively slow speed, but they're probably the most versatile of these missiles in most cases. It's a debate between the A100 and the KH-15, really. The R3 is just a weirdo. I would argue that the KH-15 is the most versatile, right? But the A100 is technically versatile in that it's actually able to hit more targets. It's just the KH-15's range makes it more versatile. You're not really going to pull much off with the A100 short range without the enemy doing something already. Anyways, so KH-15 has 1,500 to 1,600 kilometer range. It has like a 15-minute initial burn to get to its 900 km/h speed, and then it takes 900 km/h. So it takes just around 2 hours to reach the max range target. Common misconception is that only the A100 can be radar slaved. No, you can actually radar slave both of them to optics or radar. You can actually slave a 15P to radar, which for those who don't know, 15P is the radar homing variant. It'll home in on any radar in a 360-degree cone, and it'll home in any group of the radar. Sorry, and it'll home on a jammer from even further away. I think it's based on the jammer's range. I don't know the exact calculation used. That's the real major difference, as opposed to this just projects a 100-kilometer cone, and if there's a jammer in the range in that cone, it makes it a 50-kilometer cone instead. It just if you don't know, the jamming mechanic is just it halves the range of a radar that sees the jammer. Yeah, A100 also does have a seeker, but it's kind of bro. So it's more strategic tips than shipbuilding. How can I link this into shipbuilding? Roughly, I'd say the biggest thing with the A100 is that if you asked me, I'd probably just take a load of KH-15s and just chill like that. If you have to load nuclear missiles, A100Ns are always a solid bet. I'm a little out of mental to try and... They really have different uses. The biggest, I think, note is the 15P uses a contact detonator at all times, and it always goes for radar ships, so it's actually more useful against strike groups. Also, A100s, if I remember correctly, have less health in attack screen, so if you shoot at them with sprints and whatnot in AA, A100s actually die easier than KH-15s. So that's one of the main. That's also one of the main reasons I say use KH-15s. They're just generally more reliable. So if you ask me, like load an A100. If you have a strat design, load an A100, load a P and 2 KH-15s if you want to try everything, or otherwise just load full KH-15s if you want to stay homogenous. You're gonna want to try and use all the missile types in a campaign though, because especially if you're specifically relying on strategy, because you won't find enough missiles to replace your stocks if you're constantly just using one type of missile. It's more important just to know them. Anyways, that's probably not worth talking about too much here because it's not really, it's about the preview. So bombs, if you ask me, they're not really worth it. You don't really get the time to go in. One big thing to note about the bomb mechanics, though, if you do want to use them, is that if you hit something with a bomb, this applies for aircraft bombs too, and it's one of the reasons T7s are so good, is that if you hit something with a bomb, the speed at which the bomb impacts the armor determines how far it gets into the ship before detonating. It'll actually go, if you hit something with a bomb with almost no speed, it'll detonate on the armor. If you hit it with a lot of speed, the bomb will go straight into the ship and blow up somewhere inside it. And with a 1000, this is insanely damaging. I think Octagon has a design somewhere around where it's just a 4-inch strapped with a bomb strapped to it, and he would just lunge at something at 2,000 kilometers an hour and throw the bomb into it, and it would just pen into the Negev and instantly kill it. That's the biggest advice I have if you want to use bombs in any kind of design, is you want to hit them with a lot of speed, which is what makes them so difficult to use in the first place. Also, for some reason, the 1,000 kilogram bomb weighs 37 tons. Balancing, I'm guessing, is why. I just interpret it as the hardpoint weighing that much. Anyways, sprints are your AA missiles. They'll need a radar, but the radar doesn't need to have optics. You can actually put the radar inside the ship blocked, protected to save money and protection, and just use sprints for your AA duty. That's totally fine. Fuck me. I don't know the new code too much on sprints. Now they're a bit more RNG, but it used to be that you wanted to angle sprints on top of the ship because most missiles came in from some kind of sideways angle. And this meant that when the missile fucking hit it, right, the sprint would come in, it would detonate. Now, if it was at an angle like this, right, like this is like a 45-degree angle, which is what would happen if you have this, right? It would actually get, it would kind of launch up sideways, and it would be at a weird angle coming down on the missile if it was coming from side into the ship. Okay, imagine this is the sprint real quick, right? Imagine the sprint finally hits the missile at a fucking right degree angle. What'll happen is it'll detonate roughly here, generate a proxy cone, and the missile will fly past it until about here. The way the proxy cone works is that the center 5-10 degrees does the most damage, and the outside degrees do the least damage. And that's why missiles would seem to pile drive through so many sprints often, is because they would actually get past sprints that detonated somewhere to its side. If you can get the sprint, however, to come head-on at the missile, it'll be in that 5-degree cone, and it'll almost always one-shot the missile. Which basically meant that angled sprints and other and actual piloting for a moment in that thing to try and bait the missile into hitting the sprint head on were relatively important for keeping your sprints effective. Of course, KK thought that this wasn't good game design and decided that pure RNG was more effective. And so I think now it's just if it's in the cone, there's an RNG chance it destroys the missile or something or applies the damage. I don't know the new mechanics. It might just be he nerfed the damage slightly enough that everybody thinks that's what it is. I don't know what he's been thinking in 116. I don't know. Anyways, yeah. But generally speaking, even now it's still important. Angle your sprints when you mount them. That's the biggest tip I have for you. Also, when sprints are mounted to a ship, they will launch in a staggered fashion, in order of when they were attached to the ship. So if you're attaching sprints to a ship, you want to attach one to the left side, then one to the right side, then one to the left side, then one to the right side, then one to the left side, then one to the right side. You want to stagger how you mount your sprints when you add them to the ship. That way the game knows launch a left, launch right, launch left, launch right, because it launches them in sequence of when they were... I forget if it was last added going back or if it's first added going forwards. But either way, going back and forth gets the same thing done. That's kind of important to know. I think that also applies for Zeniths. Zeniths, if you really ask me, are not worth it for the player. There's kind of a headache to use. Yeah. But they can be useful. They definitely look cool as hell when they hit things, that's for sure. If you can get a ripple salvo to hit something. One thing to note is if you're firing, just don't try not to fire them against something that has sprints. They'll fire the sprints at you. Some interesting designs have been thought up where you just throw a ship at them with a bunch of zeniths, and you fire the zeniths off because they only cost 600 gold apiece to bait out all their strategic missiles or their sprints, make them fire all of them, then you retreat, and then you throw a bunch of strategic missiles at them. I don't think it's a really good idea because at that point you might as well just shoot it. If you've managed to get something into tactical range, you may as well just fight them. Is how it works. Usually the expense of going into tactical and strategic equipped group is getting into tactical range. After that, it's kind of just the fight. But yeah, expense, risk, whatever. That said, I think that goes over pretty much everything ordnance and missile wise. Engine balancing. All right, this is where things get a bit interesting, which is. There's a bit of misconceptions. He's changed the code again recently, which really is just a universal thrust nerf or something like that, which basically means everybody's eating more thrust. So there's large series engines and the small series engines. You got the D30s, both variants. D30S is static, D30. Gimbaled engines are less efficient. Remember quickly, RD59 is everything of the RD51 with 2/3 of the thrust. That's literally what the RD59 is, for example, which means that it's burning the same amount of fuel for 2/3 of the thrust. It weighs as much for 2/3 of the thrust, so on and so forth. So the advantage the thing is, so strategic designs want to use statics as much as possible because a static pointed in any direction actually adds to the ship's how can I say it? Strategic speeds, right? If I load up, I'll just throw it on the gladiator and just turn it into a mutant. Fuck it. Where's my bridge? Statics pointed in any direction adds to the effectiveness, right? So like a static pointed straight down is going to add to a strategic speed. See, and you can have most of your thrusters point down. You just need enough to make one TWR. Oh, that's not what he did. He didn't. Yeah, no, he moved to the 1 TWR. That's what he did. What used to be 9 kilometers an hour is now 0. That's what happened. But he also did, I think, go for the thrust a bit. You do need at least one thrust to weight ratio pointing straight down or gimbaled, right? So that the ship can actually hold itself up, but any thrust past that can be added in any direction you want. Anyways, so hang on. Right. So you want to use statics as much as possible on strategic side because they're just more fuel efficient. Remember, the only advantage that gimbaled engines have is they make it easier to land. This is why on most designs I actually recommend on especially missile carriers and carriers, not so much sensor ships and tankers, but you do want to have like 2 of these. It's also just good for, role play, thematic, whatever you want to call it. Is usually the ship can land. People taking their gear off. I'm one of them, but you know what I mean. I don't always do it, right? taking the landing gear off the ship to save weight, because you don't actually have to land, right? But anyways, you can't. It's not very good. It's not really a fun time doing the landing minigame without some kind of gimbal thrust. The advantage of gimbal thrust is that in tactical combat, it is technically more efficient. What I mean by this is gimbal thrust technically gives you thrust in all 4 directions, where static would literally need 4 engines to encompass everything a gimbal engine can do. So even if it's only half as efficient, it's still twice as efficient, right? So you'll want to use gimbal thrust more on tactical designs, and the few statics you add are usually going to be high efficiency engines used to keep the efficiency up. Like, this is a very good example, right? You'll be using NK25s for the gimbal thrust. That's what moves the Gladiator around, and then moving it either straight up or just keeping its speed on strategic map is its D30s, which are just high efficiency engines. All right, so the biggest thing is understanding the difference between these engines. This is the difficult part some people stumble on. A lot of people say, after a certain tonnage, you use large engines, which it's not completely wrong, but a lot of people get the actual tonnage. This is a thing wrong. So, how can I say this? It's actually that it's a specific speed that the efficiency changes. So, what I mean is, let me see. Let me do this. That, take that, do this. If I take this, put this, put that, do that. Right? Then I take, let me just put a pack on top to give it some fuel and power real quick, just to make it functional, right? So it tells me the numbers. Anyways, right. So we have 108 tons per 1,000 kilometers, and then if we used the same amount of D30s to achieve the same speed, or sorry, hang on. Okay, come on. Bro. Should be what, 4? I think it's 5. I get to 916. Yo, I did not remember these numbers. Nice, it's off center. Fuck me. Bruh? Okay, give me a second here. Let's put a big fuel tank on it. Motherfucker. Why am I... Okay, 421. You see, at this speed, you're actually getting 69 tons per 1,000. You're actually going a bit slower. At this speed, right? There's... How can I say it? We're not asking the ship to go slow, so these engines are more efficient when you're going slow. These missions are more efficient when going fast. We're currently going 400, which is over the speed where D30S is more efficient than RD at getting the ship to that speed. However, if I add a shit ton of weight to this, you'll suddenly see that, you know... But the thing is, this isn't like the 8,000 weight that everybody quotes constantly. It's more like 1,000 or 2,000 tons in reality, if you know what you're doing. It's really a question of how fast you want the ship to go. It's going to tell you the efficiency between the two. So if we want to get this going 200, it's 216 tons per 1,000, right? 259. We're getting more speed with less fuel burn, right? Because I think the switchover point, it used to be 380, but it's going to be a bit lower now. It's going to be like 350 kilometers an hour. If you want to make the ship go faster than that speed, it doesn't matter how big the ship is. If you want to go faster than that speed, you will need to use D30S to be more fuel efficient. If I actually blow this up to like 40,000 tons and I add enough D30S, you'll see the exact same effect actually play out trying to do that. That's the thing. D30S will actually still, on a super big ship, be more fuel efficient at a high speed. It's just a question, but it's just normally you don't do that, right? So hang on, let me just get this up. Let me detach it. And I can shift click it. So if we want to move all that weight, right? That's a lot of weight, by the way. If we want to move all that weight at, say, 400 kilometers an hour, hang on. Right, now we're at center mass. Hang on. What the fuck? Okay, well, let's do that. I don't care. Let's get up to 400. You're starting to see there's a curve happening here, right? And the more we add, the slower. The problem is actually based in not the engine efficiencies of the RD series, but it's actually the problem is going to be based in the... The problem's actually based in the hull weight of the RD51's mounting. That's where you have this problem start to stem from, is the RD51's hull mounting. It's actually because to add this many engines, you're now starting to add so much weight. See how it's starting to just completely drop off how much speed we're getting? Right, as we reach this critical mass speed. I'm just going to go add it. No, I need to actually add it to the power connection. Can I get it? Oh, fuck off. Let me get up to 400. Now, keep in mind, the D30s will cost a lot in terms of engine cost to do this. But it's just a good example I want to make. Can I even get it to 400? I mean, I can, but it's going to, like... Okay, I'm just going to call that, right? So now we need 2,800 tons. We're removing 51,000 tons. So we're moving, like, more... A lot of this is actually in these engines, right? If I do this, you'll see that it's actually 15,000 tons that we're trying to move. We needed 30,000 tons of RD51s to get there. And you'll see the problem is stemmed more in that. Hang on. I'm going to make a line so I can shift like this. Right, and then we just do that. And really? It has to do with how the mass curves of the game's engine work. You can see we are over the weight that we were before. Or sorry, over the speed. We're not 420. We're only burning 1862. We were burning 3,000 before. So even though we're moving an obscene amount of mass, way more than like the 8,000 people normally quote, the D30S are still more efficient because we're trying to get over a certain speed. The problem is not the weight. The problem is the speed. Now, the reason why it's technically true that this happens after a certain speed is because there's actually a minimum speed at which the sheer amount of thrust that a single RD51 is putting out, you actually have to mount two, but you can mount a D30 next to it. The sheer amount of thrust you're putting out actually pushes the RD's speed higher. It's actually inverse, that the D30 is more effective below a certain weight. Or no, that's correct. So I'm not going to example it, but you'll understand. You can probably understand what I mean, right? If you push it down to If you push it down to 3,000, no, it's 1, somewhere in the 1,000 range. Actually, I'll just do it. Fuck it. Hang on. Like, when you get down to very low, we get down to a very low mass, right? If we just want to put, like, 1,000 tons on, right? That's 2 large fuel tanks. You'll see that a single RD51 already pushes it to that stupid speed because just how much thrust a single unit of RD51 has, right? I don't really care how good it looks. Right. So we're pushing it to 138 just with these two everything because the weight is so little that it's just inherently there's too much thrust going on, kind of thing. The min-mass is kind of just based in there, the fact that the units of... It's not based on the fact of anything of the efficiency of the RD51. The problem is that we've gotten to the point where there's literally the minimal number of units of RD51s, and we can't divide the amount of unit below that. And so it inherently provides too much thrust, which inherently means we're going to have to go that speed where the efficiency cutoff happens. Anyways, I think that's kind of explained. Now, with that mentioned, there is one other note. This is kind of complete garbage. Because, yeah, yikes. Mostly because you're never making the RD59 has problems, and it's very closely competed with once you start putting gimbal squeezes to work with the D30. That's the biggest problem it has in reality because of how much weight the RD59's main engine is giving you. So if you really do want to make really big designs, the D30 is just going to kind of end up on top-ish. I think the RD59 is slightly still a hair ahead in all the efficiencies and whatnot, but the especially once you gimbal squeeze something into the engines of the RD59, but the D30 is kind of just easier to work with in a lot of cases. You'll probably end up mixing the two. And the NK25 is kind of a trap. That's the biggest thing of note. The problem is once you start doing gimbal squeezes and whatnot, the only thing the NK25 really does, the only thing it does is two things. It has a special cooldown modifier. So when you do afterburning, right, the cooldown time from afterburning is specifically faster, if I remember correctly, on the NK25 than on the D30, and the D30 I think is also better than the RD series. But if I remember correctly, the NK25 actually has a faster cooldown time, and that's kind of like the end of its real advantages, is that it can afterburn constantly. It's intended really that it can. The intent of the NK25 is that it's small enough to. Yeah, it's like per 2x. It works better when you're not gimbal squeezing. And the intent is that if you put it into a 2x2 space, and the same 2x2, if you're like very space constrained, like the Lightning is a good example, like a very small space, you're gonna, it gives you more thrust per volume of the ship, which is also, by the way, a very important thing in tactical shipbuilding is volume, because the less volume you take, the less protection you need. That's one thing. That's why gimbal squeeze is so powerful, but it's not really a note. It's not as big a note in strategic. All it really volume changes in strategic is RCS, radar something sign. So, how big the radar signature of the ship is. But anyways, NK21 doesn't really work. Just use more D30s. Like, I don't know if I have a Lightning with it that's been D30ified, but it turns out much better. Because the big thing is, once you gimbal squeeze the NK25, you then have the D30. The big thing is, once you gimbal squeeze both of them, the biggest problem then becomes that the fuel efficiency difference in tactical means you can fit less fuel to a D30 carrier while still having better burn time in tactical, which then converts to weight savings, which then converts to more agility, etc. It also means you don't have to use as much volume for fuel, which means you don't have to use as much armor, which also converts to agility. Once you really start breaking it down, the NK25 kind of just doesn't really work as well in a tactical design. That's a big thing. So when possible, try and stray towards the D30. You can get away with one or two of them. They're really just something you don't want to use in a main battery kind of thing. But that's most of the engines covered. And then the D30S is just, kind of cracked, obviously. Anyways. Hang on. Where are we at? Engine sensors. Oh, jeez. Do I have to explain sensor mechanics? I'm going to explain sensor mechanics. Why not explain sensor mechanics? Because this is actually kind of interesting and useful information that for some reason is niche. Alright. Real hours. One of these is not like the other. Wait, no, hang on. Well, too late. I gave it away. One of these is not like the other. It's the antenna. It doesn't do anything. Anyways. Yeah, no, seriously. It doesn't. I've tested it. It doesn't. Like, you take it off, you still get radio intercepts. So it's like, I don't know. Sensors are a thing. Anyways, so sensors. How can I explain this? The best way to start is how radar works. So, if I remember correctly, radar is basically check if something's in radar range, then check its radar signature. If its radar signature, if the distance to it is less than radar and radar signature, detect it. That's basically how it works as far as I know. That's the basics of it. Now, what's important, one other note, is that if you land, it cuts it cuts it because of how horizon differences work, cuts it to something like 60% range. This also applies to ELINT. It only applies to the landed platform. Yeah, hang on. Okay, so then the next thing is if there's a jammer in range of the radar, if the radar has a jammer within the jammer's range of the radar. So if there's a jammer within this jammer is within it's a 4,000 kilometer jammer, right? Fuck me, I'm in the wrong tab. The jammer is a 4,000 kilometer range. If any 4,000 kilometer jammer is within range of this radar, it'll have the range in that direction, basically, as far as I know. Or at least that's how it seems to work with fire control radars. I'm not really sure how it affects sensors, but I'm pretty sure it's similar. And that's also how it affects missiles, right? Like I mentioned before, if a 45 degree cone, it's 100 kilometers. If a jammer is within the jammer's range of the missile, you can think of it more like the jammer. If the jammer takes anything within the jammer's range and then applies to it. What's interesting about this is that a jammer, as far as I believe and know, the jammer for ELINT mechanics is just considered a radar with the equivalent range, which is to say the jammer can be detected at the same range as a radar with an equivalent range would. So if you partially block a jammer to get it down to 750 kilometer range, right, it'll be detected at the same time as an MR 700. Which is useful because most of the time when you're using a jammer, you're not using it at long range. So you can intentionally block a jammer in your designs so that the jammer's range is reduced so that it doesn't actually show up on ELINT at long range. Or a range that's like greater than your fire control radar, right? Like you block it to a 400 kilometer range, and in a 400 kilometer range, you'll still be able to blot out enemy FCR. You'll still be able to block missiles. You could get as low as like 100, 150 and block missiles, and then there's no way in the game for if it's a 150 kilometer range for it to see it past like 300 on ELINT. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Do I really have a fucking bot in here? 1 second. There we go. Anyways. But yeah. Funny. I was like, bruh. See something in the chat, I'm like, hey, person. I'm like, oh, bruh. It's my first spot. I've seen 1 or 2 of them on the main videos. It's like, it has shown up. So it's like, it's just the first one in a stream, you know? Anyways, so where it gets important is ELINT mechanics. Because if you know how the ELINT mechanics work, so IRST is kind of similar to radar. One thing I've noticed is that IRST will detect something that's turning its engines on as it takes off, as well as when it lands. It'll just identify the static signature. So keep that in mind. You'll actually show up on IRST as you take off if you try and take off stealthily or something. Anyways, ELINT mechanics are the most important part of how radar works, if you ask me. Because they actually derive what sensors are actually kind of just complete garbage. And what don't. So the way it works is the way the 1500, 1050 kilometer, the idea behind that number is trying to evaluate how far away it could possibly see the longest range radar it could ever see, which is the 750 kilometer MR 700. It's not that if there's a radar in 1500 kilometers, it sees it. It's not like that. It's actually very complicated. So you could say it this way. This is probably a good way to enter him into it and start it. Is that all ELINTs have a modifier. So it's a 0 to 2 times modifier. So the MP404, the 1500 kilometer ELINT, has a 2 times modifier. The MP21 ELINT has a 1050 kilometer or 1.4 times modifier. You can figure out the modifier by just dividing the range by 750. What the modifier simply is it's the range at which the modifier is the range it will take of that radar's max range to see it. So if you have, the interesting thing about that is, so if you have a radar modifier of 1.54. Sorry, let's say 1.4. Actually, yeah. I was going to say 1.5 for some math, but let's just do 1.4. If you have 1.4 radar, then you will see any radar at 1.4 times its range. So even though this says 1050 kilometers, that's only to see the MR700. If it's this radar, it'll be more like it's 400 kilometer range. It'll see it at 1.4 times 400. So it'll see it at 540 or something. The 2 times ELINT is an easier way to think of it, right? It'll just take the radar's range, double it, and then it will show it when it's in that range. It will be, this case will be 800 kilometers, because a 400 kilometer range, it'll be 250, it'll go to 500. So this one will go to 1,000, this one will be 1,500, like it says, right? Now, if you really pay attention to the radar ranges, that starts to note some things. So the first thing of note that's interesting is this means that any ELINT range below 750 kilometers is kind of bruh, because because anything below 750 is a less than 1 times modifier, which quite literally means if you have less than 750 kilometer ELINT range, when you fly towards something with its radar on, you will just suddenly see ELINT danger. You'll get no warning. You'll just suddenly see ELINT danger because you don't actually have the possibility to see that radar anywhere beyond its range. The ELINT rating numbers are just deriving how far from 5 being the maximum range your ELINT can see that radar, going down to danger being the radar can see you, right? In the case of 750 kilometer, versus 2 times, it'll be range indented so that ELINT 1 is about 1,500. In this case, ELINT 1 is 1050, roughly like that. I don't know the exact delineations on that, or not delineations, derivations, word for marks, but whatever. Point is, whatever you do, have along the ELINT range. What's really powerful about this is the way the AI ships are set up. Every single AI ship with a 2 times ELINT capability has an MR700. Has a search radar at the very least. I forget. I'd have to remember off the top of my head with all the changes. So what this means is, as long as you have a 2 times ELINT and you don't carry an MR700 or an MR500, as long as you can leave the FCRs running all you want, no matter an only run. I've considered courageous only, with like modified ones. When you mean Navarran only, do you mean like only one Navarran or just like a bunch of Navarrans? A bunch of Navarrans is doable. It's basically just lightning with extra steps. Oh, you mean done, not will do. Yeah, no, I haven't. That seems like fun, honestly. I could do that on stream at some point. Because like if I can modify it, as long as I can modify it off the fucking Vimples, it won't suck. As long as I have more than one I can modify off Vimples, that's really doable. But yeah, anyways, I'll keep talking if you want to answer. Go ahead. But brain. Where was I? It's okay. I'm trying to like explain this in a way that's cohesive, but I'm not a very good teacher. The biggest point really is if you have a 1500 kilometer, you can just leave your FCR on all the time. The interesting thing was it used to be that the Cormoran could stealth ELINT you. Like its FCR range was so abysmally bad that if you had a fire control radar, like if you had a radar beyond 300 something kilometers, like here's a good example. Here, let me do this. All right, so pretend our censorship has a 2 times ELINT, right? One large dome or 2 large domes so they can see a side, and we have a FCR. So we have 1,500 kilometer range and 400 kilometer FCR range. And let's just go look real quick at some strike group ships we can fight. Typhoon. Typhoon's a very good example because it has the same setup. It has a 750, right? And it has 2 partially blocked ELINT domes on one side, which means that its ELINT range is 1328, which is not even full 1,500. This would actually mean you can run at a Typhoon with an MR700 on you, like a 750 kilometer range. You can run at it with one of those, and you will see it first, because its ELINT isn't effective. Because it's 1328, so you would have a 200 kilometer buffer before they see your MR700. If you used a 400 kilometer radar, they would only be able to see you at 600 and change, 700. I think it's 700 and change. I think that's something like 1.7, 1.8 times. I just want to. I'm not going to do the math right now, right? And if we go to like another example, like a griffin's a good example because that's usually almost always attached to something. Griffin's a good example. A griffin has a different type of blockage, and this range difference won't be any difference to a partial actual obscuration. And then MR 500. The MR 500 only has 500 kilometer range and has an ELINT of 1125. This means it'll see it 1.4 times. This means this one's an interesting one, right? This is one of the cases of if you actually run at this guy with an MR 700, right, a long range 750 kilometer radar, which will just be 1125, right? He has something close to a 1.4 times. He'll actually see your radar before you see this search radar, because even though you have a better 2 times ELINT, because your radar is longer range than his, he can see you first. So that's why I don't like search radars. Search radars inherently give away this advantage. If you can mount a fire control radar in a 2 times ELINT, there is not a single strike ship group. There's not a single AI ship in the game that you do not see first, because every single one of them that has an ELINT of 2 times has a search radar, which has more range than this. The closest you get is like the Negev in the Griffin with the partially block censored. Highfleet that's been 2050K. That's a much more difficult. I mean, I guess an adapted speed run would probably be able to do that pretty easily. Not really easily, sorry. With difficulty, right? Because the current speed run spends about 100,000 gold on fuel. If I could just thin it out to halfway or something like that. It would be more like just jumping around the side of the map if it did. The funny thing is, when you make a challenge run, my first check is always, does the speed run instantly cheese it? Which in most cases it's a yes. But if I didn't want to cheese it, that's really difficult. That's extremely difficult. You'd probably just want to make some kind of Vintel brick cube type situation where you have 2 layers of armor so that you're always repairing armor. Because armor is least likely to be shot out completely, which means you won't actually pay anything repairing it. But then you have a fuel issue, which means you'd probably work off of some kind of situation of using strategic assets. That's an interesting one to think about. Yeah, it'd be kind of difficult. It would probably have 50k even is still quite a small amount of money. You got to remember, you get a lot of money in the campaign from just fighting trade groups. It's why one of the remarked hardest runs is actually doing a no piracy run, no fighting trade groups, right? Because that's actually 200, 250, something like that. A lot of gold you just cut yourself out of suddenly. It really harms your endurance. You basically pain. But I'd probably I'd probably just approach it from a modified speed run, right? Just jump around the side of the map, don't fight really much of anything, throw some missiles at a city, refuel there, move on with reduced fuel cost. It would just be a lightweight speed run. It would basically be the first gen run all over again, because the first gen run doesn't need as many ships, so it doesn't need as much thrust. Would it? Yeah, I think a first gen style where we have high efficiency ships, and then you don't really buy too much fuel at you instead actually go raid a city, because the biggest thing you're going to do there is you're going to use your starting cash to get most of your work done. Basically, you're basically just going to want to have everything already, which is not too hard to do. I mean, look at the speed runs, right? They pretty much function completely off starting cash. I fucking hate when that happens, man. It's a nightmare fighting two trade groups at once. It's you have to fight because they add 3 agility ships at a time. That's so many. The annoying part is when the annoying part is when the last trade ship is not at the end, which means all 3 ships end up on screen, which means you quite literally cannot get them all. That's the most turbo annoying mauled thing ever. The only real option at that point is to leave, let them take off and separate a bit and then grab them all. It's like annoying as hell, man. Anyways, here I'm gonna finish elaborating on radar real quick, but go ahead and keep talking. I'll keep answering. I'm just going. But yeah, so the thing about search radars, I don't like them. It's because, well, a fire control radar is really just easy and ergonomic to use, right? Not only that, but like search radars just kind of actively kneecap your ability to stealth, because if you can get 2 times ELINT capability, right, an MP404 with no blockage, that's what 2 times ELINT means, right, 1500 kilometer range. There's just not a ship in the game. What's interesting is, you used to be calm off guard and sneak attack, and then there's Comoran. He's a Comoran, yeah. It's more of a nightmare if you're using like a lightning or something. That's when it's a fucking nightmare. I fucking hate it. Usually if you can kind of get away with it if you load procs, but then like if you fight like 2 sirens at once, it's a nightmare because they'll all set you on fire. Cormoran. Where's Cormoran? Cormoran. I'm forgetting my ABCs here. GHI. Oh, it's like tiny, that's why. That's so many L. I have so much L. And that's going to be taken. There's literally one ship with a K. No wonder I can't find it. Yeah, Comoran has fucked ELINT and fucked radar. Do we use the radars in any of my campaigns? Realistically speaking, the only thing if you want to say lose out, like there's content you lose out on, you can put radars into ground mode and you can see the roads on the ground and you can use that to find the hidden cities much easier. But realistically speaking, you can just talk to Elsa here and have him reveal them, which is like less of a nightmare to deal with. When it comes to using radars, I'd still highly recommend radars, at least fire control radars. You don't really lose out on much by mounting a fire control radar, right? As opposed to like a search radar requiring actual radar display and everything, you don't really need it on the whatchamacallits. But like the extra range is pretty helpful, especially in the Kiva situation, right? Just having that little bit more range to react on the R3Ns. It doesn't technically change anything because an A100N can still rise out of Kiva at optical range and engage, but are they having when they have roads? Don't ask. They just are. They just are. But I mean, yeah, it is a valid point. You can, realistically speaking, you can play the game without radar. Like, the biggest thing about radar that'll help you is that having your FCR on all the time gives you a bit more of a heads up if you're getting missiled, which definitely means you can start taking off quicker. You can start dealing with things. That's the biggest thing is you can take off quicker. IRSD mostly works for it. But I still say fire control is better for that kind of thing, and it also gives you a better eyes on trade groups training. It's basically just kind of better range IRST. You can think of it. You're not losing out on anything, but it's kind of just better. I think that's the best way to answer it. But notably, you can also guide missiles with that. I'd still recommend to a newer player that they use radars, mostly because fire control radar gives you so much situational awareness. I think in my early game, though, I mostly relied on ELINT as a sensor, though. ELINT's your most powerful sensor, hands down, because the enemy never turns the radar off. So it's completely trustable. Anyways, but the Comoran, if I go back through time, it's ELINT 750 kilometers. 750 kilometers means it's exactly 1 times radar, 1 times ELINT. So the Comoran will see a radar at the exact range that the radar has its detection range. Looks out a window in town. I think they're kind of like underground-ish a bit. Anyways, and then there's FCR is the FCR. He did change this again after I checked it, so it might be the case again where this is actually something you need to keep your mind. ELINT radar 178. Okay, so that does mean that if yes, it does have a buffer. Yes. A Comoran will see you. You will have radar on it. If you use a 400 kilometer ELINT radar, though, what you'll find is even with 2 times ELINT, you won't see the radar. The radar you can pick up on the Comoran. Okay, so the Comoran still has this issue. Okay, so cool. This got removed by the first rebuild of Comoran, and I was mad about it because it was like the one-time radar discipline mattered in this game, and I thought KK took the skill out, but thank God he actually didn't. Now, okay, so one note about the Comoran. Comoran will never be the only sensor cruiser in a strike group, so it's virtually impossible for a strike group to cause this issue. But it might happen in a trade group on hard. They have cruisers, right? That might be where this becomes relevant. Okay, so what's going to happen is you're going to be flying along with your FCR turned on, and you're just suddenly going to get warned that there's a warning of ELINT. Now, why? Is because even though you have 2 times ELINT range, the Comoran's radar range is so utterly abysmal at 178 kilometers. You only see it at 356 kilometers. You'll see his radar at 356 kilometers. Your radar is 400 kilometers, and he sees you at 1 times your range. So he'll actually see you with a 20-something kilometer... Wait, no, it's 40-something kilometer. No, 30. Whatever. He'll see you with a 30-something kilometer buffer before you see him in terms of sensors. Granted, you will immediately see him on radar when he detects your ELINT, because you have that. You actually will detect Comoran at that range, right? Its RCS is 1140 kilometers. Not even a relevant number after 750, but let's guy this. He's like, no. Go ahead and use passive sensors. Actually, yeah, no. The reason you see me use sensors a lot on the Sebastopol in the run, if you're referring to that run, is because I very quickly killed all of the strike groups, at which point it didn't really matter if I left a search radar on, and it was kind of just nice to just have that heads up of things. Also, the long-range search radar has one niche, I should have mentioned. The long-range search radar has the niche of missile groups. If you know in missile groups in the area, right, in the next city over, and you take a city, you can actually just immediately take off, like fuck the salvage, take off, run away from the city in a direct line, and you'll see on the 750 kilometer search, because missile groups don't have an ELINT, you'll see on the long range search them coming at you in the city, and you'll be able to launch a KH-15 with non-guidance at them. But you can replace that with planes very easily, and planes will actually be more effective in some regards. If you're using planes for optical guidance, that replaces that niche completely. So, yeah. Yikes. Honestly speaking, you can actually just... Passive sensors are just better, yes. Because the enemy always has their radar on in this game. You are completely correct, yes. You're not really missing much out in radar. It's just a better IRST with very little risk. The only risk is this. This is the only risk. You are technically missing out, right? Because this is a very tiny, insignificant risk that only happens like in 1 million campaigns. But yeah, like like a Comoran running at you and suddenly spotting you is like the only time where turning a large FCR on is a disadvantage. Otherwise, like, right. Also of note, if you're landed, your radar range decreases, but also when you're landed, your ELINT range decreases. But do keep in mind that the radar range decreasing also does decrease the range for the ELINT modifier. So like if it's halved, the ELINT can only see it half as far away. Damage also, I think, affects this, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure. So, yeah. The vanilla ships are pretty easy to cheese. I spent way too long on sensors, but that's kind of a good rundown of the sensors. ELINT range is just kind of really powerful. It's your most important. 2 times ELINT is your most important sensor, probably followed by either your IRST or your large FCR. It's your debate on which we want to use. The biggest thing, the other thing about IRST is it allows you to track somebody. Like, you gotta remember, you do want to be able to track strike groups so that you can jump them at 100 kilometers to negate their missiles. So IRST is probably more powerful than large FCR, if you ask me. Anyways, so the sensor's done. I'm just going to go over the actual weight balancing of parts. So, like I mentioned way before, hull is a bit of a diff. This kind of comes into play, right? We have 2x2 weighing so much. We have 2 1x2 weighing so much? I have no clue. Okay. All right. So, yes. Ammo's a good example. So the difference between small and large ammo is that large actually weighs less than 2 1x1. 107.2, 107.2 versus 197.2. So this is 197.2 tons versus 214.4, right? Which does overcome the weight disparity between their hulls. There's only a 4-ton weight disparity, while there's actually like a 15-20 ton disparity. So when it comes to small ammo racks, the larger ones, they both cost the same amount and everything. The larger one, I think they draw the same amount of power as well. 5 people, 0.8 megawatts. Yes, they draw the same amount of crew and power. The difference is going to be that 2x2s weigh less, but 2x1s have a smaller blast radius. 2x1s are usually used more on tactical designs. Strategic designs will almost exclusively try and use 2x2s to save the weight to give them better fuel efficiency and whatnot. What was I going to do? I was going to do an example of something. Oh yeah, they also gimbal squeeze differently, obviously, which is a point towards the 2x2. So you can save more volume with gimbal squeezing. What was I doing? Armor, fuel. What was I doing? My brain's a little dead. I don't know what I was doing. Whatever. That said, right, the volume that the blast happens. So it's a little weird how blasts for ammo racks work. If I remember correctly, it's 2 in all directions for a 2x2. So it looks something like this is the blast radius, right? If it was, so it might be like that. I should probably just do it with reinforced hull instead of... But it's a 2x2 area, so hang on, let me do let me do it like this, actually. So that's the blast area of a 2x2 ammo rack, while the double 2x1, well, every 2x1 ammo rack kind of has a blast radius that's, it's a little strange. If I remember correctly, it's kind of like, this. So the thing is, because of how the piece is made, if you hover over this, you see the circles, right? Circles on them. No, it doesn't go as far in the linear, right? I forget if it's this or if it's this. I forget which it is. I actually objectively forget. Because of the way the center of the blast is on the center of the ammo rack. Yeah, because the center of the blast is on the center of the ammo rack. It spreads more easily into the sides of the ammo rack, right? The long sides, because they're technically closer to the center. And that actually makes the tip ends further away. So there's actually a pretty significant size difference in the blast radiuses of the ammo racks. You know what I mean? That's one of the main reasons these are used, is because they can actually be placed in a displaced fashion inside a ship so that they don't chain detonate so easily. Right? I don't think there's any in this thing, but you know what I mean. That's one of the main reasons you want to use small ammo racks, is that you're paying a little bit of weight tonnage back and your gimbal squeeze ability, but you're getting the ability to, what's the word? To be more survivable, right? The blast isn't as big. Anyways, that said, fuel tanks. There's a long history of how fuel tanks have been made has changed. There's been some goofy shit, but as it stands, it's kind of the same story in a way. The large fuel tank ends up being more fuel per tonnage for its large size, instead of being an explosion issue. In fact, fun fact, the fuel tank is probably one of the tankiest modules in the game. Makes no sense, but unironically, I have designs which use the fuel tank as an ablative scheme. In fact, if you go back to the speed runs, I I actually survived a missile impact directly because of one of these, and it saved the speed run because I built the ship in such a way. Where is speed? Speed's a good example. Maybe it's fan speed. Let's go with fan speed 6. Yeah, using ablatives as a protection scheme. This is a fucking tumor. Oh, this is the one where the gear broke. This is not even a finished one. Interesting. But the idea is that the field tanks actually have like 400 health, and now they count as a solid module, I think. He finally changed it to fix them. So they can block projectiles and still have a shit ton of tankiness. I'd show, but this video is going on forever, I would show. Or stream or whatever. But basically, the only drawback is they'll catch fire if you're using them like that. So they're not. It's very good for strategics, actually. I very often use large fuel tanks on strategic ship. You should use large tanks on strategic ships whenever you can, really, whenever it's viable. The only time it's not really viable is when you don't need that much fuel, like for some kind of light censorship. But otherwise, you really should be using these because they're just so efficient. Or not so efficient, but because they are efficiency, and you want to buy efficiency in as many places as you can on a strategic ship. And also because in a strategic map, the fires go out the moment the little attack screen of getting hit by a bomb or a missile ends. So, I mean, an aircraft attack will go on for a while, and it could be a problem, but you don't really need a fire suppressant for a strategic ship so much. So, it basically gives you, like, pretty good protection as well. Small field tanks, their advantage is that they're gimbal, squeezable more, and so on and such. But, yeah. That said, where are we at now? Is there like an earlier version of this? Huh, that's some goofy shit. Man, I went through so many variations of those things. Do I have one where it's just a circle? There we go. That's more what I mean by like having a blade scheme. Right, a missile hits any of this, it's just not happening. It's not going through. It's not doing shit. Anyways. What are we looking at? Right. Generators, once again, have a similar situation where the tonnage diff puts the large generator... Actually, not the tonnage diff. I think they weigh more. They do. 43.3, it's 86 point... Yes. So, large generators weigh more, but they give you, instead of 2.8 plus 2.8, which is, I think, 5.6, they give you 6.1 megawatts. Yeah, it's 5.6. They give you 6.1 megawatts. They need one more person. Actually, no, they need two less people. No, one less person. They need one less person than two small gens. And durability is double. Yeah. Generally, 2x1s are more efficient just because they give you more power per ton, if I remember correctly. So on a large ship, you want to use large gens. Keep in mind that when you're building a ship, power, especially if you're only using statics and whatnot, does not matter on strategic ship as much as you think. Like, you can still land with half power. And so on. And sensors don't care how much power they get, they just need power. And realistically speaking, the ship needs power to exist for the engines to fire. And realistically speaking, sensors don't actually need power, they just draw from the power source. But, yeah. Anyways... Generators. Wait, no, we're on generators. Right. But yeah, also note that the 2x1 versus 1x2 debacle is actually making this wake up a bit bigger than you think. Anyways, FSS, only really notable thing I'd say about it is that you can use it to cool engines. A lot of people don't know about that, apparently. But yeah, if you fire the fire suppressant while the engines are overheating, it suddenly resets their heat. So they have kind of a niche use in that respect. Can give you a lot. You can get a lot more thrust if you're afterburning, and then at the end of the afterburn chain, you suddenly FSS, and then you keep burning. You can get a lot of dodge out with that. Outside of that, quarters. Quarters is one of this is that major case where this whole situation debacle comes in. They has just exactly double the amount of people. They weigh 17.6 versus 35. It's what? 15, 30, 34, 5.2. Yes. So the tonnage is almost exactly the same, but the problem is the mounting difference. You need a 2x2 to mount large quarters. So The weight difference of the hull means that small quarters are just objectively better. Just outright. Also, other interesting fact, quarters count as a power connection, if I remember correctly. Do not ask me why, but they do. Let me double check this is still a thing. Highfleet. Highfleet. Crew quarters are a power connection. Like, to be fair, you don't actually need a power connection for sensors. Sensors actually don't care. Like, this says it doesn't work, but it'll actually work in the strategic map for some reason. It just loads all the sensors in the ship, checks their blockage, and doesn't care about the power. But yeah, that you can do that for engines and stuff, I guess. Highfleet. Anyways, yeah. That's that for relative part balancing, which means we're finally on shipbuilding techniques. Pain. Right. Let's start with gimbal squeezing. All right, we're getting to the advanced stuff. Finally, stuff that might actually entertain some people. All right, let's start with gimbal squeezing. This is one that's more infamous or well known, which is a way to save volume in a ship. So it's called gimbaled because you can take a gimbaled engine most of the time, right? So we got this situation, and imagine we want, let's put a, I don't know, do this. Let's do a little bit of that. Let's just put that over there. Don't mind me, just doing dumb shit. This doesn't matter. This side doesn't matter. Right. Let's do a bit of that. Alright. Take that. So what we want to do here is we want to get this engine. Let's get a large in, right? We want to get two 2x1 parts in. But what if I want to save some space? There you go. Gimbal squeezing. So what it is I think crew quarters actually allow you to do it. Let me check. Yes. So you need to use a gimbaled engine of some kind. This is where this is the best part. It's where we go a little bit insane. I think you can actually do it with a static, from correctly. If you know what you're doing, you can do it with a static. I forget how you do it with a static. I think it was, no, it's with a static, you can do it with a rotary, right. Okay. So you can take these modules, any of these modules. I feel like I'm missing one. Am I missing one? Am I missing one? Oh! Right. Let's do that. Right. And then any 2x2 modules as well have interesting properties. I'll put these aside in a second. Hello, Lydia. Sorry if I was a second. I was just looking at this. You joined just in time. We're getting to the part where I actually start to break the game a bit. All right. Before it was just kind of niches, setting groundworks, understanding things. Now it's where we break the game a bit. Fuel tanks? No. I'm trying to remember. There's a 2x1 module I'm forgetting. Whatever. It'll come to mind. Oh. Yeah, I guess I'll just do them. Okay. My mind. So, specifically you need the 2x2 triangle and the 2x2 square. You can do it with 2 triangles, but it's not really recommended. The reason why is because you then lose out on the attachment point on here and here into something, right? This literally wouldn't attach if you use a triangle. So basically what it does, what it means is you can fit, if you could call it like, each of these is like a 1x1, right? This is a 2x2 module, so it's for volume. We call it a score or a number of volume. Just joined. I'm going over the part where I break it. We're doing gimbal squeezing overview. 1x1 plus 1x1, 1x1, 1x1. So it's 4 volume. So with this, you can take what would normally be like this normally has to be mounted to a 2x2 module. So normally it technically has 4 volume, right? So normally these two modules together would have 8 volume, but you're fitting them into 6 volume of space. The tonnage is staying the same. In fact, the tonnage might be technically worse depending on how you do it, but it still means that you get more volume. And remember, like I mentioned earlier, volume is tonnage at the end of the day on a tactical ship, because it means you're squeezing more into a smaller space, which means you put less armor on the outside of the ship in order to get the same amount of protection. Hang on. So let me think. So specifically, you're doing it by... I'm trying to like iterate it. You're specifically doing it by trying to get this corner into this corner. I think you kind of understand what it looks like. You could probably reproduce it at home or whatever the hell. Now, elaborating a bit, it'll let you do it with these 4 straight out, and it has to be done with an engine, right? However, a static engine can go into a static engine will also go into a rotor engine like this, if you want to fit more engines on. Usually you'll find when you're trying to space save with gimbal squeezing, it's what drives you to add more engines to the ship because you want to fit more things on it, right? You can't just do it with a static. The static has to be like with this tier of module, right? These group. You can do it the other way around. You can do it. Usually you want to do it like this so that you can't use the 2x2 below. You can't use this area below the engine. So usually what you want to do is you want to place it like that so that you can inherently just mount one right below it. But how heavy are the partial 2x2s compared to the square ones? They're the same weight. There's actually an interesting story to why this happened, which actually goes back to the fuel tank versus fuel tank thing. Back in the day, I think it happened because of this. So the problem was 1x1s and 1x1 corners had different weights. Now they have the same, right? Because these were lighter, but you could mount a fuel tank to 2 of them, right? These were lighter before, right? This setup was lighter than this, so the balancing was broken. And what actually happened was, if you made a lattice out of these corner pieces, and you just kept like stretching it out and made more fuel tanks, and you did this, you did that, you did whatever, you can make a fuel tank like this, but you have a custom size, and you'd actually be more efficient on weight. And that's why nowadays these have the same weight. Is because I think it was just hitting. It might have always been that way, but I'm pretty sure it was hit for the same reason that the 1x1's got the same weight. And that's how that is. It might be heavier though, as it was reinforced all in some way. So the biggest drawback, this is that you're gonna lose structural redundancy. You can't actually attach anything on this little bit, which can be more of a problem than you think. So you have to actually kind of really work in the insides, because on some kinds of ships, the insides can become very frail. But we should just say, if one specific part breaks, like 5 parts of the ship will suddenly fall off because they're all kind of spidered onto that. And that's where a lot of the puzzle game of gimbal squeezing comes from, is making sure the ship is still structurally integrous. Like that it has like 2 or 3 redundant connections going in every way, so that the ship isn't just relying on one part that can be shot out from the outside. Anyways, this actually, though, extends to other things. So the fuel tank's a good example. And so is the large hull. You can actually do this. This is less known, is that you can use some interesting finagling. Ignore what I'm doing here, but pay attention a second to what I do here. So if you know what you're doing, you can then take... This won't work with the cut corner, right? But if you take a triangle, you can do the same thing, right? Now, people used to actually do this with guns, and you still can do it with guns if you want. Let me put the cabin on this so it actually renders properly, right? Oh yeah, arcs are turned off. He kind of goofed with it, I think. Yes, that happened to armor. Lightning fully armor with small triangles flying without problem. Now they all weigh the same. Yeah. Light armor got it for different reasons. I'll go into it in a little sec. I was going to do it after gimbal squeezing, because triangle armor schemes are something I was pretty into. But what you do with this is you can actually cut in. And what happens is the internal corner of whatever you put here, right, cuts into the fuel tank, and you save 1 volume. That's basically the idea behind this. The real problem with fuel tank squeezes is that large fuel tanks are usually too much fuel for a tactical design to be viable, and only on tactical designs do you really want a gimbal squeeze. So that's the only real drawback to the situation. But Octagon's designs like to use this a lot. What he used to do is put guns into the corners. And back in... Okay, now it's rendering properly. Yeah, KK updated the way it being cut in the corner works. It used to be there was like an angle like kind of like this. And then it would actually be able to shoot through this rest of it. It was like the wall was blocking it, but the other side it could no-clip through. Now it just kind of blocks everything in the corner. It's still a pretty decent arc. But he used to put a quad mullet setup on this, and the only real disadvantage was that the guns were dispersed, so they didn't have the greatest precision overall, but they still had decent firepower per ton with good field per ton. Let me think. But yeah, you can put a lot to this, and this basically means that you can save, right? We basically just got in the same volume of space as compared to like if we were just building things around this fuel tank. We've basically gotten a free 2x2 AMRAC worth of space. Or we got free 4 points worth of space out of just doing that. Right? And of note is that this is also extends to large hull. This can be done with large hull. The problem really with large hull is you're mounting modules to it. It won't be compatible with the Squall. Squall's not compatible, right? But it will be compatible with the engines. You can mount an RD-59 like this. So it's kind of like the gimbal squeeze, but for the large engines. I think I've never really tried an RD. I'm pretty sure an RD-151 can do it with like the top corners cut out. Yeah, I don't think it likes the bottom, but it's fine with the top. With the RD-51, which is fine because this would be exposed anyways, right? Then again, you could have probably put a cords or something or a generator or something that doesn't care about it being exposed there. Oh yeah, my phone's dying. But yeah. Okay, with that explained, then there's another step, which is... you can do this with missiles. Now, missiles only want to be done into themselves, much, I think. No, actually, no. Missiles allow you to squeeze into everything as well. So you can actually make compacted missile silos with this as well. You can do it. It's a bit tricky at first. You can sort of see what I mean by, like, things don't like to connect to themselves. Yes. See what I mean by, like, the structural integrity kind of problem happening here? Because you're not connecting into this part and you're missing a corner piece, you can have problems. There is a way to do this, which is, I think it's this. Right. If we do that and then you repeat it infinitely, you'll be fine. And what happens with this is now we have the ability to fit 2 missiles into a 3... Instead of it being a 4x4 space to fit 2 missiles, it's now 3x4, right? Like if I put a piece of armor on the bottom, let me put a piece of double hull on the bottom, actually. That'll be more obvious what I mean by this, right? As opposed to, like, if we did a normal silo, it'd be like... Obviously, there's like a 1 piece here, right? It's like, I have to do this. That exemplifies that's what I mean by 3. See what I mean by it's now more compact kind of thing? So you can do that. You can also do it vertically. I just built it wrong and I just kept going as I was. But that's a way you can fit more missiles inside a ship. Also keep in mind that blocked missile arcs don't care. You can still launch the missile in strategic, so it doesn't care at all. So don't worry about that if you're doing that. When you're doing gimbal squeezes, you can also fit small modules in. You'd only use it for a fire suppressant. That's the only time I'd say you'd use it. But you can do it with a mod. You can do it one of 2 ways. You can do it the same way as you did before, or you can do it what I call the Integris way, which is if you take. That's me being dumb, but whatever. I'll just do that. If you do this, you can do this what I call the Integris way, which is you do this. And then you just fit a little corner in. Now, the difference here is this little block here, unlike this situation, has full attachment in every direction. It attaches here to this part, and then it attaches in every direction. In this case, you're missing the cut corner, and it's not internally attached. This is internally attached. The only difference is this isn't technically attached to this. So if this gets shot off, this can't technically connect, but it's much more integrous. The problem is you're not actually squeezing the same volume out. You can't fit a, right? You can't fit a module in there, right? It won't let you, but you can still fit a whatchamacallit, and you still save a space. So the big thing is if you can get another one of these somewhere else, a good example is right next to it, you can then get a full module. So this is half as effective. So you're getting, for 6 space, you're getting 7 space of modules, as opposed to before you were paying whatchamacallit space for yeah. So hang on, you gotta do it like this. You gotta do it like that, and then you take that, and then you do that. Right. So now you're getting 6 volume. Right, it'll stop blinking when I connect it, minus the power connection, obviously. Right, that gets you 6 for 7, but it's more integrous. You can also just do it with this piece. It'll let you cut it in, right? But like it'll work, right? Like 2 of these. Fuck it. Right, this will let you do it too. I don't care. You can do it like that. Right? You can do it with this, but there's not really much point if you ask me. The only reason you'd want to do that is if you want to refit the design at some point. That's the real only reason. Otherwise, this is just plain better. But you'd only want to do this if you want to squeeze a fire suppressant in somehow, and relatively speaking, it's a real waste of space. But, it's something you can do, right? I'm just trying to give you everything. I'm trying to give you all the tools here to make your own ships kind of thing, right? Gimbal squeezing power connections. I already did power connections. Blockage. Did that? Yeah. I fell apart a bit. I know I'm missing something I was going to do. Just hold shift. So if you right click, you can pick one up off the thing. If you right click again, it'll disappear. Right, hold right click. Now you hold shift. Click. Done. It'll stay on your hand. And if you pick up a group of parts, can't be the cockpit, right? Hold right click it. Hold shift. Click. What the fuck? Okay, well fuck you too. It's because I was holding it by the engine. Right, if I do this. Right, multiple parts. Go nuts. And, yeah. You can also select a section like that. That's just for deleting, right? If I hit the delete key, that all disappears. Minus these engines, because they fucking bugged out and disconnected. But, that's also something you can do. Sorry, I probably should have mentioned some of these controls, because they're kind of inherent things. But I'm an idiot. Where was I? Okay, so I think I'm running out of things to do at this point. Let me look over a ship or two and see if I can remember anything. I've also trying to thought. I know there's one thing I wanted to do, but I didn't get around to it. Yeah, here's a lightning. This is a good example of building with D30s. Instead of NK25s, as opposed to a normal lightning. And then the D30's fuel efficiency cuts back. Lydia wasn't here earlier, like I mentioned. So I'll repeat real quick. Is D30s, when you're gimbal squeezing, are more effective than NK25s because the fuel, they burn less fuel in the first place, and you're fitting them in the way they fit into the volume and whatnot. Because they burn less fuel, the fuel uses less volume, which also uses less weight, which also blah, 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 protection. Triangles, that's what I was going to do. Okay, now I'm remembering. But yeah. This is a good example of just how nutsoid you can go with gimbal squeezing, right? Quite literally a lightning. And this is what I also mean by, oh, thank God I didn't know. I don't know why I have these. I think I have them mounted in like that for aesthetics, but in an in-max setting, you'd want to put those in 1x2s. This is kind of what it looks like underneath the hood. And like, it's very specifically designed so that like, if it breaks apart off, it doesn't destroy the whole ship or cut off on either swath of it. Like if this breaks off, right, it doesn't, it has this connection into this one, cutting down here. If I lost this, it would be pretty bad. No, it's not. Yeah, because this is well designed, right? Also, my phone battery's dying. That's why I'm using the watch chat. I'll just do something in a minute to plug it in. Right. But this is kind of what I mean by like under the hood, a lot of gimbal squeezing, but you get like a lightning volume into doing something else, right? It takes a lot of work to do something like that, though. That's obviously something you can't really just do mid-campaign. That's something you're gonna have to do to a ship before you use it, because you just quite literally have to completely redo the structure to do it. But you can get some pretty good advantages out of it, right? I could probably add some more fuel to that lightning or something and just get the speed back up. I don't really have a lightning with. I do have the funny still here, which uses it to some extent. The where is it? Where is it? It's in S. I know it's in S. It's in Q, so it's like low, right? Yep. I think it was Mark II is the actual one we've seen. Like the Squall Lightning is a good example of taking this to extreme. Right? Of how much absurdity you can actually pull off. I'm just kind of throwing this up because it's also just some examples of, oh fuck, gimbal squeezing and what it can do. Right? Bruh. The average reaction to the Squall Lightning. The Squall Lightning is still one of my favorites of all time. Just how much you can get done with gimbal squeezing is absolutely fucking insane. You can put like 4 guns on the Lightning, easy. Oh, I never mentioned. I mentioned an internal time ago. You're not allowed to gimbal squeeze a gun into something, right? So hang on, if I take this off. You're not allowed to gimbal squeeze a gun, right? But the A220... Okay, so hang on. Let me do an AK-100. You're not allowed to gimbal squeeze it. It won't let you, right? Doesn't let you do anything to gimbal squeeze it. KA doesn't like it. You are allowed to gimbal squeeze guns into landing gear, though. Because they're kind of a non-module. That's one other thing of note. You're allowed to gimbal squeeze into landing gear, even guns. Everything's allowed to gimbal squeeze into landing gear, because landing gear is kind of just a non-module. It may as well be empty hull. I mean, I mentioned it before earlier on that it's not bad. It's definitely the best out of the 180 mil series, but it's still got it. It's still not on the same level as the metaguns. But yeah, the A220, however, has a unique position in that it actually can be gimbal squeezed, unlike the other guns. Truly a bro moment. Right. Oh, storage ship. There's also a different concept of ship you can use in early game. It's just a ship with enough engine to make it count as a flyable ship. And it's just got a bunch of stuff. And then you just take this part off. And then everything falls into your inventory and you're done, right? I use that in speedrunning, is what that's used for. But you can use it in a normal campaign if you really just want parts for mid-campaign, especially like R3s or whatever. Just put them in your storage immediately. Oh, here's the original speedrun ship. Hey, yo. The OG. Now that is how you use a blade of fuel tanks. Nomad's 180s with A220 and they work fine. I don't know. Again, like I mentioned earlier, A220 doesn't really have the versatility. That's the problem I have with it. The Mark II 180 is still kind of broad in terms of capability, though. It's more of a Mark II 180 problem than a Whatchamacallit? Right, so let me think here. So like, I think Tarantel's a good example. What the hell is the Tashkent? Oh, it's this abomination. I was making some. This is what I meant by like you can make a side fighter type gun arrangement. This is something that might be more relevant to note is how you can use pyramid schemes for 116 rework. It's gonna, yeah, it looks awful, but this is what KK is forcing us to fucking do. This is what I mean by like mass D30 is pretty good. Tarantel. So Tarantel is a good example, actually, surprisingly, of a pretty efficient strategic ship. The only real inefficiency is the gun. It's carrying maybe a little bit on the low side on missiles, but it's carrying 2 missiles. It's primarily using statics. The only thing that's really a problem with it is these engines, right? And excess hull, right? You really shouldn't have flares on strategic sign. Oh, that was not something I should have taken off. Oh, I think my phone just died. All right, well, I'm going to be alt-tabbing to check chat now. Bruh. Right, something like that. The power might be excessive, but you're pretty much, like, it's not even that far off, right? It's just a bunch of 1x1 hulls. At that point, just keep them for the aesthetic. It's very close to actually being a meta ship, surprisingly. It goes fast. It has good fuel efficiency. This is actually kind of close to what I'd call actually a pretty on-meta ship. Again, the hull form doesn't really matter so much on, whatchamacallit. Real. I curse you indeed. But yeah. Okay. Let me think. Right, armor schemes. So triangle armor is also something. I wonder if the Zolotaya. What if the Zolotaya still works? Here's a good example of Zolotaya is a bit of a long story of flexibility. Oh, what the fuck? Why so much does APS still work? Oh, the APS hasn't been updated to 116 until I change a module, doesn't it? Watch, the moment I put a gun on it. Real. Alright, well, Zolotaya was kind of the idea of a Negev-based kind of hull idea. And it's a good example of using triangle armor scheme, right? Which in this case is what I'm going to go after. You can do this where you have it into hull, which just gives you some space outside the hull, which just looks good. But more important in situations like this. So what you got is you have... Oh, these armor triangles are not updated, bruh. So what you can do when you're protecting a ship is you can do what we call a triangle armor scheme. I don't care. So instead of using a 2x2 or 1x1, 64, 128, yeah. So let's look at 64, right? This is 32 tons. And up here, I'll have to put this over here, actually. What you can do is you can take an internal armor triangle, you can put it underneath, and you get 32 tons. So this is 64 tons of armor, same as this, but both of these have 100 durability, which means you actually have 200 durability on this plating. This armor piece is twice as expensive, but twice as strong for the same weight and space. You can repeat the triangle pattern as much as you need. You just do this. Do something like that. And you basically pay twice as much for the armor, but the armor is twice as strong as it stands. What's also notable is how AP mechanics work. Note that the white side of the armor actually has no effect. The gray side can be out, the white side can be out. It doesn't actually matter. Like making ships that look like battleships only is... I actually just like to reverse engineer vanilla ships and whatnot. I like to just use vanilla myself, but I still have a very, very firm... I still sometimes just make ships of all the other kinds, right? So I still have a firm grasping on everything that works, and I still sometimes apply that back to how to make the base ships work. I don't really make cruisers as much as I make frigates and whatnot, mostly because they are off meta, but I don't particularly do any, I'd say. skill issue. Fuck you. Fuck you. Get out of here. Fucking nerd. I know you. Nathan's in here. Shot. But okay, anyways. Armor. fucking anyways. Armor. Brain turn off moment. Right. Twice protection for twice the cost on the same thickness. But with AP mechanics, when AP shells hit an armor, they every time they hit a piece of armor, it reduces their penetration damage, everything like that. So a situation like this, it's actually going to hit almost every angle possible that a round can hit. If you really want it to be a little bit thicker looking, but I don't think it actually affects hitbox. You can do this. I actually think this looks better if you ask me. This scheme actually looks better in my opinion. If you care about aesthetic. But anyways, almost any aspect that an AP round can hit the ship will hit too. It's not via... What it used to be was that the internal angle actually weighed 18 tons. Like, for example, here. This ship's from 115. So when I load it, not all the parts update to 116 standard. This is an 18.2 ton angle, right? So what you would do is you would take it and you would do this. And you'd get 18 on 18, which is like 40 something. 36.4 tons. I think it's 36.4 tons as opposed to 64 tons, right? So you actually had less weight. You had twice the protection for twice the cost at less weight. Now because he patched the internal triangle, it's now just that the angled armor costs the same amount of weight. It used to be that it would literally give you lighter armor. Now it just gives you same weight armor. But it's still, the big thing is AP rounds, every time they hit an armor plate, they lose damage and pen and whatnot. And like if you add 5 armor plates, it'll stop even 180 millimeter AP, if I remember correctly, something like that. So the more armor plates you add, the more impervious you are to AP, basically. And that's like the advantage. I think though, like if an AP round terminates in an armor, it does a shit ton of damage. So, and that's also why kind of a big eliminations like the Wimple Brick exists. Where's the Wimple Brick? Wimple Brick. Is it even named that? Wimple. May as well find the abomination. Wimple. Where is it? It's in V. It should be low, right? They even call it Wimple Brick? If I didn't call it Wimple Brick, I'm never finding it. It might just be called Brick. Brick. Yeah, the Brick series used internal triangles heavily. They have some issues with splash, so it used a armor scheme. You can see that it's a mass packing of D30s. I actually gave it 100% crew for some reason. It uses 2 RD51s on external mounts with power gens. I think the V2 variation is using crew cabins instead to exploit the fact that crew cabins are a power connection. Nope, it's not. I guess that was a fix I never changed. Oh, this is the 116 gun update. That's what it is. But yeah, this is more what you'd see in some situations. The big problem is it would have like armor issue. Yeah, 36.4. So yeah, now it's more of just a double protection kind of thing you do. But it does have some issues with splash. I would still probably stick to standard armor in a lot of situations. It's mostly because of that doubled cost issue. And it does have some integrity issues. If the internal one somehow gets shot off, the external one will pop off with it. It's kind of bruh. Yeah. Do I even have the original brick? Where is the brick? I call it the board cube. That's why. Real. Now that's a Wimple Brick. There we go. Now this was in 115 when the armor triangles weighed double. Which is to say, the internal and the external triangle both weighed as much as a square. Which this is when it really didn't matter to use triangles. You would just use squares for everything. but I still made it out of angles because the volumetrics would make it better. Yeah, this thing was made to kill the Zootopia of Ariag, which is kind of a long story, but it has 7 layers of armor. Let's just say that much. This was designed to bypass a ship that had like 200 and something APS or something like stupid like that. And the idea was the Vimples were the best caliber to go past the APS and just not deal with the APS. Fun times, long story. But anyways, I'm getting off track. Let me think. This isn't show off my ship collection day. This is fucking how to ship build day. What do I have left? So have I got anything? So I swear there's something or other I'm missing. I know I did triangles, but... I don't think I did. If anybody's got any questions, go shoot right now, by the way, while I'm trying to get my head screwed back on. Bro, what the fuck is this? Oh, it's that garbage. I don't even want to look at that thing. That's an eject failure. Don't study from that. Funny. I'm trying to think. I mean, if you have any questions, shoot them. Because I think I'm struggling to remember. If I don't got anything, I'll probably be ending stream. But, did I go over APS? No, I did mention APS. Engines, yeah, I noticed noted how to gimbal squeeze them. Let me go pull out, like, I'll pull out one meta Corvette, or close to meta Corvette. Vulture, where's Vulture? So it's actually not my design, and it might not work perfectly, but it's a close study to what a meta ship might look like. Where is it? Was it this one? No. That's a decent carrier, though. 6 planes. That's where you're kind of aiming for. Yeah, I don't remember. That's a failure. Don't use sprints for AA only. They have RNG problems. No, I don't have it. Oh, whatever. Oh, yeah. I had that at the end of the video in the 116. Okay, hang on. Let me answer your question. I may have spent too long alt-tabbed. Scale of 1 to 10, how degenerate say less? Depends which ones. Some of them are like a 2, some of them are complete 11. As for what do I make, what do I like making? Here, I'll start showing you how to do the 116 Seva, or not, sorry. Because I actually did, you're reminding me, because I did actually try and make 116 Seva a little bit better right before doing the stream, so I actually do have some notes on that. And as for what do I like, I'm not really a fan of making battleship-esque ships, mostly because they're really fucking tough. They're a real pain in the ass to keep looking good while also making them not suck. But unoptimal ships are just kind of fun. I think I have a frigate that's just an RD-51 and that's all that's holding it up. Where is okay, yes, okay. So Sevastopol. Seva. Alright, okay. So this is Seva 116. If you really ask me, the biggest problem with Seva is just getting these D30S shot out. Like, the D30S are great and efficient and all, but, like, I don't like the idea that any shot that lands on the bottom of the ship instantly takes out 2,000 gold, and then it has the same 115-7 problem with this ammo rack, right? So let me load up what I had. It was very, like, I only took, like, five, like, I only put, like, 5 or 10 minutes of effort into this thing. But this is more of what I came up with, which is you swapped to generators on the bottom. Sure, you can get them shot out, but I gave them excess power so that you can actually lose how many of these? You lose 2 of them? Oh, it's only 2. I was supposed to only, like, use 2 cows or something. So the idea was you switch to generators, then you disperse D30s around the ship to try and then make up the weight loss or the power loss. And that way, if you get shot in the belly here, it's not as big of a deal to the ship's fuel economy, right? Because if those D30S got shot up, you just kind of fucking face planted in terms of tank fuel economy. It was just awful. The ammunition racks were actually changed out to a Vimple battery, which is probably actually not a good idea, but it's probably asking for too much gun. I've got ammo racks now stuffed into the internal spaces. Bit of a rejig, engine here. I didn't actually use this space. You could use the tower for something. You can't quite make it as good as 115.7 because 117.7 was kind of just made straight up to be APS, if you ask me. J section. Saw a guy in the suburb that closed the engines and took 1 block of fuel. Oh yeah, no, you can do that. I don't like doing. Yeah, no. One of the biggest ways you can just fix Seva. Like the entire point of this was to be coherent with the Sev only runs like restriction of don't edit the hull or armor. So the idea was I'm not allowed to just patch holes in the armor. I'm not allowed to like a lot of other people do things like they take a fuel tank out, they change the hull, they add like a little tumor here or there, right? And that can definitely make it a lot better. But the idea of that, a little bit of the challenge was to actually make it feel like Sevastopol was doing the run, not so much something that was like based off Sevastopol. Right? If I really wanted to improve, I was only now thinking that maybe if people would want just a normal Sevastopol upgrade. If you want a normal Sevastopol upgrade, first would be taking these engines. It would be on the same thread. You'd want to take these engines out. They're just... D30S are efficient and all, but you really just can't afford to just have open engines like that. It's not a good idea. Not when they're that important to the ship's floatability. So you're going to just put armor back on. If you wanted to, you could use double triangle. Considering this is Sevastopol's belly armor. It was a good place to do it. But I'm not going to really do that because that's a little complicated. Or I should, but it doesn't really matter. You're probably going to like, I don't know. I'd probably double triangle if anywhere. I'd double triangle at these ones. There's no real downside to double triangling it. Remember, it's just more expensive for more protection. The only problem will be here, you'll lose a bit of integrity. In fact, you know what? Why not do it? Why not do it? Fuck it. Because the tonnage is the same. Right, so you'd be like... I'm just gonna do it with this. Fuck it. Editing a large ship. This is why I don't like editing large ships. I forgot. Everything takes half a second. So if you're making a small ship, you're basically making it as fast as you can think about it. In this case, you're literally waiting for inputs. It's like annoying as hell. Hang on, let's just do this. Let's see, do that, do that, do that. Doesn't look quite as good as a full armor belt, but whatever. Maybe if I used internal triangles for the end pieces. But it doesn't matter. Here you run into a little bit of an issue where end pieces usually don't... It's hard to do end pieces like this, though. That's one of the other things. I would just do a square, honestly. It's going to have more reliable integrity. This will look better, so I'm just going to do it. So that gives you a little bit more protection down there. Right. So at that point, you can probably switch it over back to D30s. You can just put the D30s in the same place. The problem is not so much that the inches are there, the problem is the inches are exposed. And the D30s won't cost you as much speed as you think to switch off of the D30S, right? And then we need to get those 4 ammo racks back. That's pretty easy to just get 4. Do that. These ammo racks won't really cost you anything in terms of survivability. They're all next to stuff. Yep, no problem. See you around. Let me see. It's always a pain in the ass. Let me see. Okay, hang on. Okay, so... I just need to get the thrust back over 90 a bit. Jammers for funsies. Not really any real reason besides it's just fun. And it's kind of a thematic place to put a jammer. Same place I put on the Sev run. Let me see. Like I mentioned before, large quarters are less efficient, right? So there's no real point in having them be the 2x2 spots, especially when I need D30s. The one thing I hate about Seva is 116. She has this thrust list issue. It's fucking annoying. I have to remember if it's left or right. I think it's left. So doing this, I can actually kind of like point a bit of thrust into fixing it. At that point, the lower racks actually become safe. $27, $28, okay. 26. A little bit risky with the AP rounds, but it'll be what it is. Right, that's pretty okay if you ask me. This basically returns Sebastopol back to her old pedigree, if anything. She should be able to go toe-to-toe with things. Do I have crew? I don't.
Right. Then we go over to generators. At that point, then it goes a bit more down to personal preference. Do you want a little bit more gun? Do you want to just have a bit of excess power? I'm going to go with excess power in this case. And then take some crew. And put it somewhere where I put generators. And apply this generator somewhere. I don't really want to put things under the side belt, since considering they're going to be like some of the main protection of the ship, but I don't have much use for that space anymore, so. Just a little bit of excess power anyways, so that makes for a decent Sevastopol in 116, if you ask me. At least it doesn't have the glaring fucking bottom thrust problem. Which, it astounds me that KK gave it these giant holes in the bottom when he could have just used D30 normals. Like, the only problem with it is fuel consumption. That's the only problem. It's like, it's not even that bad. It's like... So it's like, take that out, right? It's like, I should be able to top fight just about anything. I love 116. The fucking detonation happened here and everything in the middle gets cut out. Also, fighting two fucking Varyags is a pain in the ass. Hang on. So I still can't fight the Varyags. That's one of the problems. But I guess not Varyag. It should be fine. I mean, she can fight them. It's just a little difficult. Not two at once, though. Point defense once again, ruined still. The enemy has been destroyed. Emergency is broken.
A generator has been destroyed. Missile away. Kill confirmed.
I'm not even using her properly. I haven't even top fighted like more than once. I really do like broken gun conversions.
The OKs are on fire. The enemy
Around
has
the
been
bottom of the
destroyed.
ship catch fire. And cruiser fights are so goddamn buggy and stupid in 116. It can hold its own. I didn't even top fight properly, which would work if it was like a... Can I get it to be a Varyag only on the first? Hang on. Yeah, Varyag Bori. Hang on. Let me top fight a Varyag Bori. Perfect.
Missile launched.
Oh, I'm literally above them. Cool. You're like...
System is burning.
Really?
A generator has been destroyed. Fuel system is on fire.
Damn spam, man.
Missile away. A generator has been destroyed.
Side of the ship
The
explodes.
OKs are on fire. Missile away. The OKs are on fire. Missile launched. The fuel system is burning. The fuel system is burning. Engine lost. The fuel system is burning. The enemy has been destroyed.
There you go. As long as you can top fight, the bottom armor is pretty strong. You might want to actually edit that one ammo rack. You might want to edit that one ammo rack back here that detonated. No, wait, what? What detonated? What even detonated when that Zenith went in here? Oh, fucking me. I hate 116 so much. But yeah, sorry. Anyways. That's an example, right? Of how to fix 116 Sawa. Mostly just return its top fight capability and then try and work with it, right? You could probably put an armor block in here if I think if you know what you're doing. No, you can't. Why can't you? There's a piece of hull there. That's why. Yeah, that's fine, right? You can do something like that as well. Try and right? Get a little bit more protection on the bottom engines. Just try and give her a bit more guard against a bottom fight scenario. I don't think this is allowed. Oh, it is. Okay. Just stop some rounds from coming in the bottom. In that scenario, I took more damage from the Varia because I started shooting her center instead of her bridge. Because I'm not used to 116 glitch. And then also, yeah, I let a missile get through here. And then at that point, I just said, fuck it, and I started just hammering. But if you can fight a Varyag one-on-one, there's really, and you can fight a strike group, then there's nothing really else you need to worry about. So at that point, just economics if you can do it. Anyways, yeah, I think that's about it. I've been going probably way too long. It's probably like 4 hours. 9 to 3 hours. Well, it's something. At least the VOD will be something for people to watch. Thanks for everybody who stopped by. I think I'm gonna call it. I'll give a minute or, yeah, I'll give it a minute if anybody has any questions further. And then I'm gonna go to stuff. I'm probably gonna base a much smaller video off of this. Do something like a, I don't know, proper guide. real. All right. Well, I think that is our pay. All right. If there are any questions, I am on the Discord if I miss you, but if you're typing still, but I think I'm going to call it. All right. Well, thanks for sticking around.